top ERP systems for 2024, new AI regulations, and a panel discussion among leading ERP vendors. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here today in episode number 147 of Transformation Ground Control.
This is Transformation Ground Control, your source for all things business, technology, strategy, and change. If you're growing your business, leading change within your organization, or undertaking any sort of operational or technology change initiative, this podcast is for you. This show covers what you need to know about digital transformation, organizational change, operational improvement, and business growth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Cheatham. This is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation, including the strategy, people, process, and technology sides of change. Kyler, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you, and great to have the audience here listening as always. New episodes of this show come out every Wednesday. You can find that at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also subscribe on audio podcast platforms throughout the world, or just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com, and I'll give you the links to all the places that you can listen and watch to this podcast, or listen to and watch this podcast at that website. It, however, cannot teach people like me how to speak without stuttering. So, but you can find the podcast at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Great episode for you today. We're excited for some of this really cool stuff. Very, very relevant here as we come up on the year end of 2023. We're going to start off our opening segment, as we always do, with audience questions. So we'll get to those social media questions that have come in our way. And then we'll also get into a couple hot topics, one of which is going to be super interesting, which is new regulations in American companies as it relates to artificial intelligence. So I'd be curious to see not only what that means in the Americas, but also what that means for the rest of the world, potentially, as it relates to AI and the adoption of AI. We'll also talk about USA News' new ranking of top 10 ERP systems for 2023. And we'll do a discussion there to see how it compares to our own ranking of top 10 systems for 2024, which Third Stage Consulting recently launched. And you can find that, by the way, you can find that top 10 list by going to the links in the description field below. There's a link to download those top 10 systems and our overall digital enterprise operations report for 2024. You can find that in the links below if you'd like to view that. So those are the hot topics we'll cover. And then later we'll have our first guest on the show, Cheatham, who is managing director at Third Stage Consulting. He's going to be on the show with me talking about the top 10 ERP systems for 2024. In fact, we're not just going to talk about the top 10. We're going to just talk about top systems in general for 2024, as well as some of the trends and movement in the top 10 list, and just talk a bit about how different vendors compare to one another. And then later in the show, this is going to be a very cool segment we're going to play for you. It's actually a clip from our recent Digital Stratosphere Conference. And at our Digital Stratosphere Conference, which is a tech agnostic conference we host each year, we had a vendor panel discussion, which we had never done before. We had several different software vendors all on the same panel, and we wanted to talk about general tech trends and, you know, what's happening in the market development-wise, that sort of thing. And we're going to play this clip, and it's going to feature executives from Infor, IFS, Epicor, and NetSuite. So, you know, 4 leading ERP vendors. We're not affiliated with any of them, so we were able to facilitate and moderate a discussion that's very candid and transparent and unbiased and not focused on marketing, sales, spin, all that stuff. So that'll be a good segment, especially as we think about what are some of those leading ERP systems that we should be aware of as we head into the new year. So be sure to stick around for that. That panel discussion will be after we have our first guest on the show. But before we get to all this action-packed stuff we have for today's episode, Kyler, what are some of the questions that you're seeing from the audience here this week?
Absolutely. Well, some great questions regarding some of our recent content that I kind of want to dive into. So if you remember, we kind of talked about the customization versus meeting the technology in a few of our recent episodes, and Eric recently put out some videos on that. So one of our users had a really good question, Eric, that I wanted to bring to you. What is the balance of, this user calls it a canned solution, or a lot of times it's referred to an off of the shelf solution, and versus customization? Should it meet the needs of maybe 70% of our business processes, 50%? What does that look like as far as understanding how much we should influence our business processes to meet the technology in order to avoid complexity and high costs? So great question there.
Well, I think you and many audience members may already know how I'm going to answer this with my two favorite words. It depends. It depends on what industry you're in and what your business is. But I would say that in general, generally speaking, you throw out two numbers, 50 and 70%. Should a canned off-the-shelf solution be usable, or could you adopt to at least 50 or 70% of the canned off-the-shelf functionality? I'd say those are sort of the minimums. You should shoot for at least 50 to 70%, maybe even more. And most organizations can. I think it's, even if, let's say it's 80%, let's just use that because it's a nice round number. It sort of fits that 80-20 rule. Let's say you should strive for 80% use of functionality off the shelf. Some might argue it should be even higher. It should be 90, 95, 100%. I don't think that's realistic because most organizations have enough nuances and unique aspects of their business that they need some level of customization, or they may just require a third-party bolt-on solution that doesn't fit that core enterprise tech that they're using. And you don't have to choose just one option. You can have multiple systems. It's not ideal necessarily, but you could use multiple systems to manage some of those different functions. But whatever the percentage is, if it's 80%, that last 20% is a big deal. And that's last 20% is where companies get into trouble because they end up struggling with the customization. It introduces a bunch of risk into the project. It just elongates the project, adds to the budget. And it also, a lot of times puts you at odds with your software vendor because oftentimes your software vendor will say, well, just use our software the way it's built. It's best practice. And you as an organization might be saying, well, no, it's not best practice. It doesn't fit what we need as a business to be successful. And so you have to sort of navigate that and make the business decision that makes the most sense for you. So I'd say if you shoot for 80% plus, that's a starting point. I wouldn't expect, and I wouldn't say getting close to 100% is good, because if you shoot for 100%, it's just going to create a bunch of other problems as it relates to change management, things of that nature. So I think 80%-ish or more is probably a good expectation and a good target to shoot for.
And maybe like reformatting that question to say, why are you changing your business processes? What is the purpose behind that? Is it vendor sales pressure? Is it efficiency for the business? And being able to have that intentional and mindful strategy approach behind it, as opposed to, kind of rush to fit a software that might not be the best fit for your business. So that's really, a great question and a great point to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this question, I think this person is a genius, whoever asked this. And I'm super curious as to what you're going to say to this. So this talks a lot about our content around how to get the most out of your demos, because those can be a huge pain point when it comes to selecting the right software and understanding how the software is going to actually be implemented and activate within your organization. So why don't software demos offer the opportunity to try the system in a private environment or within the business without vendors? This is something that I want my team to be able to try on without any pressures from the vendor sales team. Genius, right?
Yeah, it is genius. And it is a great question. That why not? Like, why couldn't you just go play with it or mess around with a sandbox version of the software? I know some vendors, it's very limited, not many do it, but some vendors do offer that. I know, for example, Odoo, an open source ERP vendor, you can actually get a free version of their software. You could actually do that right now and go to their website, get the software without, I think you have to enter your contact information. So you will get hounded by a sales rep, but you can do that. You can go enter your contact information and get access to the software and start messing around with it. And you actually get a free instance of the software for your own organization. So limited capabilities, limited use, of course, but it does give you a chance to mess around with it a bit and play with it in a sandbox environment. It's a good question. I don't know why that's not more common, to be honest. I know with the old on-prem model, it was really difficult because you would have to have, a sales rep would have had to set up a new instance of the software every time someone wanted to try it. And that probably was too cumbersome back in the day for most for most software vendors. Now, with the advent of cloud, and especially SaaS cloud solutions like NetSuites of the world and Workday and Salesforce and whatnot, or even S4HANA on the SAP side in the public cloud, you've got all these multi-tenant SaaS offerings that in theory you should be able to turn it on for any prospect that wants to go into a sandbox environment and mess around and sort of create data and try stuff. Whether or not they will, I don't know. I haven't heard of them doing it. I haven't heard of NetSuite or SAP doing it with S4HANA public cloud or Workday, Salesforce. I don't know of them doing that. But some vendors do, and I guess I'll be curious to see if it spreads across the vendor community. But I think if customers put enough pressure on them, they probably will over time. They have the means to do it now with the cloud for sure.
Do you think it's a question that's worth asking when you're going through the evaluation phase?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you think it's a long shot, or even if you get weird looks or responses from your sales rep, I think it's worth asking. I mean, why not? Why couldn't we get, especially if you're looking at a SaaS, multi-tenant SaaS cloud solution or a public cloud solution, there should be a way for them to create a sort of a sandbox demo test environment that you could go in and mess around with.
Very interesting for sure. And maybe an evolution as we talk about our 2024 top systems and offerings. One more question I'll bring to the table, and this is a really interesting one too. We talk a lot about vendor lock-in, and that's kind of been a conversation that's been trending in our industry, in our marketplace, the risks of vendor lock-in, what that looks like. This question is mostly about moving to a SaaS solution and having managed IT services actually manage your cloud. So what does that look like as far as risk for vendor lock-in on that side of the maintenance post-implementation?
Yeah, as far as what do you mean? As far as like the maintenance of cloud solutions, is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah, so this user is asking, okay, I chose my system, I implemented it, I was really mindful of vendor lock-in the entire time, I understood those risks. Now I'm looking for someone to manage my cloud service. Is vendor lock-in a risk when I'm looking at those partners?
It is. I mean, it always is. I guess it's anytime you use a lot of one vendor, you become more dependent on that vendor, and the leverage between you and them sort of shifts. The vendor has more leverage and more control over you than you might want or than you may have intended. And that certainly is true in that managed service environment where now not only are you using the vendor software, but now the vendor is providing all the managed service support type capability going forward. That's why I am a fan of diversifying. If you can diversify either your applications and or the support you're getting for your applications, it just takes your eggs out of, prevents you from having all your eggs in one basket. So I think it's a great question and something that it's important to be aware of, because that vendor lock-in is it's a real challenge to overcome. And especially with today's cloud technologies, the switching costs are a lot higher. They're higher than ever now. To switch from one cloud provider to another is a lot more difficult than it was in the on-premise model. So you better like the vendor you're getting locked into. And I guess the question becomes, what do you do to mitigate that risk? And what do you do ultimately if you decide you do need to switch vendors, which will happen to a lot of organizations at some point? It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, I think in previous episodes, you kind of called it a marriage, right? You have to make sure that relationship is something that you can sustain. But diversity not only brings lower risk, but it brings innovations too, especially in a new environment that you may have not gone before as a business, which we'll talk a lot about in this episode as far as new innovations in enterprise tech. So great questions. Just a reminder, we bring all of our user questions to Eric. He's never seen the questions before, so we put him in the hot seat every week to ask him these questions. You can either tag him on any of his social media channels. He's on LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, and a variety of other social media channels. Instagram, highly recommend as well. And then also you can go on our brand channels at Third Stage Consulting Group, wherever you get your social media content, and leave a question there. Our team does comb through all of the great questions that we have. These questions also are not just for Eric, they're for our audience members joining us now. Speaking of diversity in the conversation, that's our overall mission here at Transformation Ground Control. So be sure to kind of pop your thoughts and insights around that, and we can aggregate those into future thought leadership. So thank you for the great questions. And I know we're excited to get some more user-generated content around some hot topics that you guys sent us this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. And we'll get to those hot topics here in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about AI regulations in American companies and sort of what's happening on the AI regulation front, not just in America, but what does that mean for the rest of the world as well. And then we're also going to talk about USA News's newly released top 10 ERP systems ranking for 2023. And we're going to talk more specifically about how that compares to our Third Stage Consulting's top 10 list for 2024. And we'll see what the differences are there. And then later in the show, after we cover those two hot topics, we're going to have Adam Cheatham on the show. He's going to be on talking about the top ERP systems for 2024. So we're not necessarily going to go through a top 10 list or do a countdown of top systems, but we are going to talk about the leading ERP systems and how they compare to one another and what some of the trends are to be aware of in the technology space going forward. And then last but not least, after Adam is on the show, later in the show, we are going to have a vendor panel discussion. It's actually a clip from our recent in-person conference called Digital Stratosphere. We hosted it in Denver in October of this year. And in that, one of the sessions we had was a really interesting vendor panel discussion where we had executives from Infor, IFS, Epicor, and NetSuite. We're all on the same panel. And you facilitated, Kyler, a discussion and tech agnostic and objective, non-sales and marketing spin-ish sort of discussion with general trends and things to be aware of in the marketplace with those vendors. So that'll be a super interesting sort of a supplement to the discussion about top ERP systems for 2024 as well. So stick around for that. We'll have that vendor panel discussion later, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with those hot topics and we'll go from there. So we'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
But we're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can see all the past episodes at that same website, and you can also subscribe and listen to and view the podcast from that same website. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to check out more episodes. So we've got some hot topics here, some really interesting hot topics related to software vendors and AI regulations. What have you got for us, Kyler?
Yeah, absolutely. So just recently here in the US, we've launched some legislation around artificial intelligence and just the overall policies. And it's kind of following suit. We've talked a lot about, what they've done in European nations and what that looks like as far as privacy and security, but just kind of wanted to bring you up to date of what we look like as kind of global standards around that. So this was an executive order. So it still has to go through our Congress and our overall legislation bodies, but it's actually from the president. So with an executive order, that shows a level of urgency around that. And that's something that we really feel like we've seen in the marketplace as far as a need. So there's a few key directives, a few I wanted to unpack with you when it comes to looking at that piece. So the one I really want to get into is the actual competition around AI. So that's been a bigger conversation around how do we ensure that there's a competitive marketplace when we do have tech titans? I thought that might be a really interesting question for you, specifically because you see what that can look like as far as power and influence in technology in the marketplace. So what are your thoughts on needing more competition around AI from specific vendors?
Yeah, I think it's it makes me a little nervous, I guess, when you talk about regulation and you talk about the tech titans. So you have these big behemoths that are involved with AI, of course, like Microsoft and Google, as an example. Elon Musk, I just read recently, has his own platform that he's ready to launch using X, or Twitter X is his sort of the backbone of it. But then you've got some startups, upstart vendors that are providing AI solutions as well. So, when you get into regulatory type stuff, it just makes you wonder though, is it gonna favor certain players over others? Is there going to be biases in the market as a result of that? I don't know. I don't know enough about the regulations that are in question or being discussed. But it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's so hard to measure because a lot of this is privately owned data. So how are you
Mhm.
going to ensure that you have that oversight of those in support? These all sound like great opportunities in supporting workers and standing up for consumers, standards of AI safety and security. Those are all great conversations to have, but from a governing body, that will be extremely hard to activate. So I'm going to turn to the audience and see, what are your thoughts around, should it be a government policy around safety and security around AI, or should that be a group of business ethics that are something that we should, abide by as, a business community? So very interesting conversation. And this actually came to us through one of our users. So if you do have more information about this, or you would like us to cover something on transformation ground control, definitely pop an article in my inbox on LinkedIn. Our viewers do it all the time, and it's something that we love to be able to feature what is valuable to you. So we'll keep an eye on this. Again, just an executive order at this point, but it is something that's moving towards additional legislation, specifically in the US and European marketplace.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how that unfolds in the coming years and how it's just a matter of time, I suppose, until governments throughout the world step in and take some sort of action. It's just a matter of what action are they going to take and how does that affect the AI space?
Yeah, absolutely, especially since it's really a global network. So it's hard for governments to look at, how do you regulate things like election tampering, or when they're not done in the domestic area in which the governing body is responsible for. So definitely a very complex conversation. And speaking of complex, as you'll talk a lot, and we'll talk a lot in this episode, choosing the best ERP system for your business is an incredibly complex initiative. So I'm really interested to share this updated from US News. That's the best systems of 2023 to consider. So some of these that are on this list are not on your list, or not in kind of some of the lists that we've launched as third stage. We do have specific verticals and industry lists. So that's a big question that I always get, what should I do if I'm in food and beverage or heavy manufacturing or in, renewable energy, all of those different, we actually do have top 10 lists within our content that you can search on your YouTube channel or on our website. But the best overall winner, ready, I'll do a little drum roll in my microphone here, is actually Sage. So this is one that we do mention in our top 10 list as well. But I think it's very interesting that the best overall ERP system is Sage. So this vendor includes Sage X3, Sage 100, Sage 300, and Sage 500. And they talk about this because of the marketplace of 365 third-party integrations specifically, and the range in which that integration showcases, which is a trend you talk a lot about in the industry. So what is your reaction to that, of actually Sage being the best overall ERP for businesses on a national news list?
Well, I mean, anytime there's a top 10 list, you have to wonder, was there any vendor influence or sponsorship of that list? And I don't know if there was here or if that's the case, but I kind of get it. I mean, Sage is pretty common, especially in the small and mid market. So there's a large customer base using Sage. I think there are some scalability issues with some of the Sage solutions, as far as, once you get to a certain size and once you get more complex, you can outgrow Sage. But it can be a good viable alternative to, a NetSuite or, and other vendors that are more focused on the small to mid market. Whether or not it should be number one, I mean, you and I could debate that all day. The audience and you could debate that all day. But Sage is not a no name. Sage is a well-known solution. It's been around for a long time. They've got a good product suite. So, so it sort of makes sense. I don't agree with it being number one necessarily, but that's okay. We all have different opinions of the market.
Yeah. And that's the importance of that diversity in conversation. So turning to the audience, what are your thoughts on that? And I will just say, one of our colleagues came in the office because I was laughing hysterically because one of the cons on this list, literally, and I quote, lacks some features of ERP systems, including sales management, logistics, and customer support, which are obviously very core competencies needed in an ERP system. So again, it depends, right, as with our approach of what do you need out of your ERP system and what is best for you. One I also wanted to ask you about that I've seen on a variety of 2024 lists is specifically in manufacturing is SysPro. And that's one, I know we talk about on the delivery side, but when we look at kind of a heavy manufacturing, especially in today's age with challenges in supply chain, with inventory management, all of those different things, SysPro seems to have gone up on lists and overall awareness when it comes to conversations in the ERP community. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, it really has. Syspro and another one that comes to mind is Acumatica. Those are two systems that are often used by manufacturing types of organizations, largely, or at least that's where we see them being used. And they're just good. They're good examples of niche focused solutions that are not necessarily trying to be everything to everyone. They've got their target markets and customer bases that they're good at addressing. So I think it's also a good reminder too that you want to look at your options and understand that there's a lot of vendors that may not have the marketing budgets of like an Oracle or a Microsoft to plaster airport lounges or airport banners all over for their advertising. It may not be well-known names, but there are established, very viable vendors out there like Syspro, Acumatica, and others. So yeah, I think it's a good up-and-coming solution to consider if you're in that space.
Yeah, well, speaking of those pop culture or large advertisements, someone did call you the Tony Stark of ERP this week in your YouTube comments. So congratulations on that. And I will say
Nice.
Larry Ellison's actually in Iron Man too. So it's all cyclical. So very, very cool.
Is he
Great
really?
compliment. Yeah, he is.
So
Yeah,
that is cool.
absolutely.
Very,
So, I know. Soon, you'll be doing cameos in Avenger movies, I'm sure. Absolutely. So
I mean, it only makes sense. And then the next thing you know, Larry Ellison will be on this podcast.
I know, 100%. I really do think we're very close to Larry Ellison, but I digress.
Yeah,
the
right.
last,
Larry,
the last,
Larry and Elon are the two that we've got to get on here.
I know, absolutely. We're moving towards it. So everyone tag them in the comments. You heard it here first. So
Yes.
the last one, Eric, I want to ask you about today is an interesting piece. We've also recommended it. It's one we well know, Katana, which it kind of goes back to the free trial model or the overall ability to gain leveled access without intense licensing. So just to give you an idea of why this is on the list, it's for small businesses. It's only $99 a month. They do require an annual contract, so you will be in contracts that you need to review. But it can go up to the $800, $900 a month. And has some onboarding fees. So that on-demand opportunity in training. So this has seemed to be something that's been more of a trend of that subscription model that's more customizable as well. So wanted to get your reaction on not only Katana being on the list, but also the ability to kind of have more control around your subscription level.
Yeah. I think it's a great point. In unfortunately, organizations don't have a lot of transparency or visibility into the pricing or the options that they have with their subscription models, and they end up overcommitting the subscription cost. And so I think easing into it, you can always add to your subscriptions later. So I think, there's a couple of things you mentioned. I mean, it having that transparency and managing your subscription costs, but also just being able to sort of try before you buy too much of a software is another movement. And, I think that's sort of on that customer bill of rights, things that you should have a right to do before you commit to a software vendor.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to have some more conversations around the top systems of 2024, what we've seen as far as systems trends and what we've been actually recommending and seeing our clients really like. It's one of the most important conversations we have during the year. So highly recommend, turning into that, as I always call it, it's a rewatcher. You want to rewind it, you want to watch it again to ensure you get kind of all of those nuggets. So looking forward to this conversation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be a fun one, and the reason I know it's gonna be fun is because we did a conversation like this last year with Adam, who's going to be on in just a moment, talking about the top ERP systems to be aware of for 2024. We'll talk about how vendors are evolving in the last year, going into the new year, what's changed in the last year in the vendor landscape, and just what are the general tech trends to be aware of. So we're going to have Adam Cheatham on the show. He's managing director at Third Stage Consulting, and he's very knowledgeable of the market, and it'll be a great conversation to unpack and talk about some of the different vendors in the market and what they're doing and what some of the trends are. So stick around for that. And then later, we're going to have some of those same vendors that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. We're going to feature some of those same vendors later on the show in a panel discussion. We're going to play you a clip from our Digital Stratosphere conference where we had an in-person panel discussion with representatives or executives from Infor, IFS, Epicor, and NetSuite. And it's a great conversation because it's very rare. I don't think I've ever seen multiple software vendors in the same room talking about trends and evolutions of the marketplace and things like that. So it's a super interesting conversation that we'll play for you later. So stick around for that. But in the meantime, we'll be right back with Adam Cheatham to talk about top ERP systems for 2024. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Just tell me what you've got to say to me. I've been waiting for so long to hear.
Hi, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm your host here on Transformation Ground Control. And if you haven't already, I want to invite you to buy my new book. It's called The Final Countdown, Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. It's my first book. I'm very proud of it. I love this book, and it was my attempt to create a summary and a playbook for what it takes to be successful in defining a digital strategy and a roadmap for your organization. So there's a lot of things we can cover when we talk about digital transformation. We talk about a lot of stuff on this show, but I wanted to condense it into a readable, sort of a sequential format that made it easy to help define a digital strategy for project teams that is unique to your organization, unique to your goals and objectives. So really hope you'll read it. I hope you enjoy it. Again, it's called The Final Countdown. You can read that book by scanning the QR code right here in front of you, or you can go to thefinalcountdown.com. Again, it's been an Amazon bestseller since it came out, so I encourage you to check it out and love to hear your views and your comments on it too. So The Final Countdown, my new book, you can go to thefinalcountdown.com or scan the QR code in front of you. Hope you enjoy, and we'll see you soon. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Kyler Cheatham, and you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So be sure to check it out there. And at that same website, you can subscribe to the podcast in the audio-only versions of the podcast, or you can find links to watch the podcast, the video version of the podcast on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as well. So be sure to check it out there. Excited for our next guest. He's been on the show many times over the course of this podcast. This is his second time on the show talking about this exact topic, which is sort of our year-end discussion of what to expect in terms of software vendors for the coming year. So we're going to talk about the top ERP systems for 2024. And joining me is Adam Cheatham, who's managing director here at Third Stage Consulting. So with all that being said, Adam, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody else from around the world. These are always fun. I love joining these conversations. So appreciate you bringing me in.
Absolutely. Love having you here. And we were just talking about right before we came on live here, late, by the way, because I was late today. So just to be clear to the audience here, the reason we're starting late is because of me, not because of Adam. So it's totally my fault. But we were talking right before we went live that we did this same session last year. It's been almost a year, but it feels like we just did it a couple months ago. We did the late 2022 version of this show where we talked about what trends to be aware of for 2023. So it's already been a year. It's time for us to revisit this topic again and see what's changed in the marketplace and see, what exciting developments we should be aware of as we start planning for ERP implementations in 2024. So I guess just to start, maybe Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself for those that haven't seen you on the show before. Tell us about
Yeah,
you and your background.
yeah. So I'm managing director at Third Stage Consulting Group, which generally means that I'm responsible for all of our delivery teams and making sure that they have all the tools that they need to produce the high quality that we pride ourselves on at Third Stage. I have a background in taking the digital transformation conversation from a business perspective, where the goal is for technology to serve as an enabler of technology. I like to think of when we talk about achieving the third stage of digital transformation, two key phrases. One is self-sufficiency, and the other one is continuous improvement. If you are not obtaining both of those within your ERP, you've not gotten to the third stage, because you should be able to run your software by yourself without heavy dependency on maintaining code from a vendor or a system integrator. And you should be enabling your continuous improvement goals as a business so that you can continue to grow at the pace that you have sought to grow at. So that's really where my background comes from. I've been doing this type of thing for, gosh, it's 15 years now, it seems. It's been a long time, but I've always enjoyed working with you, Eric, and Third Stage in general. So this is a cool conversation.
Yeah, our time together goes way back. So we've seen together in this space. We've seen a lot of interesting stuff happen and develop in the marketplace. So it's been a fun ride for sure.
And today's conversation will be no different, right? This continues to evolve, especially with the many changing technologies out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and already the audience is very actively engaged. And I appreciate that, because I'm not a morning person, and it's morning here in the U.S. And I like that the audience is just keeping me. They're getting me going here with the comments and questions here already. But I want to thank all those of you that dropped in the chat where you're joining from. People joining all over the world, as I mentioned before: Denver, Colorado, Austin, Texas, Rochester, New York, Baltimore in the U.S., Sri Lanka, Pittsburgh, Paris, Oman, India, Milwaukee, Jeddah, Belgium, Hungary, all over the place. So UK. So thank you everyone for joining here today, and I love having this global community. It's pretty cool thinking about, all of us all over the world talking about this same stuff, all live here. So thank you for that. But just to maybe get started here, what's if we sort of back up a little bit and just sort of look back on this last year in 2023 and where we're headed in 2024, what are the biggest trends for ERP systems in 2023? Like, what are the biggest developments in the space that we should all be aware of?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing is the continuing trend towards cloud and subscription-based software, right? It gets harder and harder every year to talk somebody into selling an on-premise system, and that's something that I think is only going to continue. It's a massive revenue driver for vendors in general. So I think that's something that it wouldn't be an only 2023 trend, but it is a continuing trend, I would say. And we've also started to see vendors talk a lot more about AI, which I think is an important thing to touch base on, especially as it pertains to the way that we approach software evaluations, which is we don't recommend being the guinea pig.
Right.
And right now, AI is developing. It's a developing technology. It does a lot of great things. That's true. But ERP is something that, from a developing a new technology perspective, tends to be a lagging adopter, if you will. So if you think about the subscription trend, for example, that's just now really, I'd say over the last year or two, reached a critical mass in ERP. I think AI is going to do something very similar, in that it's just going to continue to need to develop before it becomes something that you can trust. The way I like to think about it is, if you're putting your business's lifeline up to chance because you want something new to work, if you've never seen it work, and I promise you, software vendors right now have never seen it really truly work the way you think it should, take it with a grain of salt. They're gonna spend some time developing it. That's important, but at the same time, realize where it's at. If it's on the future roadmap, that means it doesn't exist yet. So,
Yeah. And when you go into vendor conferences this year, it's amazing how much the focus has really shifted to AI. I mean, they were already talking about it. They're talking about machine learning and AI and stuff like that pre-2023. But if you think about it, ChatGPT really just bust onto the scene late last year / early this year. In a very short amount of time, it's suddenly become the #1 trend that the industry seems to be obsessed with, which is just AI and how are we going to build AI into our tool set and how are we going to fast track that. So it's been pretty interesting to watch.
How do you differentiate between things like predictive analytics and AI? Are they different?
Right.
Maybe. I like to think that maybe even things like MRP, that these things have been around for a long time. We've been using data to make decisions. The only difference is in AI, in my opinion, is you're asking it to be a little bit smarter. And as data becomes more mature in an organization, your system can be a little bit smarter. And that's really what you want to look for.
Yeah. Here's an interesting comment from the audience on LinkedIn. Venkat says AI can be a reality or fade as a myth. So
right.
You're curious to see where we go. I don't know. I'll be really curious to see how this unfolds because, in my time in this space, I don't know about you, Adam, but in my time, I don't recall a trend that has taken hold so quickly, even though AI is not new necessarily, but it just has reached this tipping point of
all of a sudden,
obsession or whatever. And it's really fascinating to watch. I'll be curious to see if it really does stick, which I think it will, but who knows?
Yeah. And it's we even have the comment here, a 90% correct algorithm is better than a 75% sales manager. And that's there's a lot baked into that comment. First of all, you got to get your algorithm 90% correct. That's not easy to do. And it's even harder to prove that it's 90% right. It takes time to figure it out. Same as if you have a 75% sales manager, it's gonna take you time to learn where that 25% wrong is, just as much as it's gonna take you time to learn where the 10% wrong is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point too, which is, in parallel with ERP vendors trying to figure out how are they going to bake AI more, more significantly into their offering. In the meantime, what can we be doing as organizations to get ready for AI? And I think there's, some things I think you alluded to, maybe it's worth unpacking as it relates to data and that sort of thing. What can we be doing to get ready for AI? So when AI is mature and when it's relevant to us as an organization, we're ready for it.
Getting your data clean and comprehensive, right? If you want to think about AI as artificial intelligence, think about what data your brain gets as real intelligence, right? So it's taken in a lot of different sources of information, just the same way AI needs to take in a lot of different sources of information. And if you're missing a big piece of information as an individual, you can make bad decisions without it. AI is entirely dependent on data and pulling that information in. And if it's missing a hole, it's going to act like it's missing a hole. So that's the biggest part. Clean and comprehensive is the key. And it will take me a long time to get to the point where I don't feel like there always must be a human intervention point, right? You don't want AI running your business. I think somebody just hired an AI as a CEO or something like that.
I didn't hear this.
It did not go well.
I can't imagine that it did.
And then there was another restaurant that was in San Francisco. It was an AI restaurant. It's an AI smoothies restaurant. They were open for 2 weeks.
Right.
So, it's an early adoption type of technology that you got to watch out and know what you're getting into.
Yeah, and Gage on LinkedIn has an interesting comment here, a question, which is related to what you just said, which is it will be interesting to see whether AI is used as an enhancement tool to human operations or replacement, and what areas, industries, positions that will affect. So I think it's a great point that you're both making, which is what is AI going to mean to us as organizations, as a society too? But that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds and why organizations use AI. Are they trying to eliminate humans or make them better at their jobs, or some combination of both?
Yeah, and then you start thinking about the change management aspect of that, right? Like it's change management is hard enough when you talk about replacing somebody's spreadsheet.
Right.
You talk about replacing intelligence, and now where are you from a change management perspective, and how do you approach that? it gets a whole lot more intimate in the competition with individual jobs. And I do love this. If you're missing a hole, it's going to hallucinate data to fill it. I had never thought it never crossed my mind that artificial intelligence could hallucinate.
I mean, anything's possible with AI. That's what I'm hearing anyway.
They made movies about it,
Exactly. Back in the 80s, they were talking about this stuff.
Right in the year 2000.
Yeah. Well, that's super interesting. Here's getting into the actually, before I go to that, this is a comment to fill in a gap or to complete the thought there with the AI CEO. Mika, the CEO, only had a rum and spirits producer. So that's interesting. Someone that produces rums and spirits has a CEO that's AI, but no longer. Apparently Mika gets fired. Is that right? So am I understanding this right? They hired AI and then did they fire the CEO?
I don't know exactly what happened, but I did read that it was not exactly as planned. But I guess if it's a rum producer, maybe the purpose was misdirected. And well, if we have AI run our company, there's more time for the rum.
Right, exactly. Or they were drinking rum when they came up with the idea of having an AI CEO.
Somebody was going to be the first.
Yeah. Well, so for everyone that's worried about AI taking human jobs, we've got a case study here of AI losing their job to a human. So there's good news. There's a silver lining in all this. I'm here with Adam Cheatham talking about the top ERP systems for 2024. We've got a lot more to cover. Stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
And it's a word that man can eat at all. When things are big that should be small. Who can tell what magic spells?
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Kyler Cheatham, and I'm here with Adam Cheatham talking about the top ERP systems for 2024. We've got a lot more to dive into, so let's jump back into it. Shifting gears a bit and getting into some specific vendor-ish type questions, which I think is what everyone really wants to hear. That's where all the juicy controversy always starts. And leave it to Kyler, our co-host on Transformation Ground Control, to really stir the pot here. This is her question here on, although I don't think she means it this way. Her question is, what are your thoughts on SAP's move to mid-market with the announcement of Grow? And I've got a follow-up question on another vendor related to this in a moment to build on this. But what are your thoughts about SAP sort of going down market, announcing this Grow initiative to try and further penetrate that market?
Honestly, I think it's about time. I've been waiting for them to do this for about 5 years with the HANA platform. I thought it would end up on a HANA platform, to be entirely honest, but it's slightly different. But I think that it was time for SAP to come back into that. I don't know how many folks have evaluated the Business One platform and the other pre-existing SAP smaller market products, but they're starting to look old, and they're starting to really become antiquated, right? The investments just weren't there. So it's time for that to happen. I've heard some great things from them about it, and I'm interested in seeing how it turns out. I think it's also worth going back to the don't be the guinea pig conversation. They're saying some amazing things about these platforms. Like they can have a core business processes up in as quickly as 4 weeks and a full ERP as quickly as 13. That's incredible. The only folks that I've seen do that effectively to date are NetSuite with their Suite Success methodology, and they can do it. So I believe that SAP can do it as well. I just haven't seen it yet. So the Grow and the Rise platforms, I think it was time for that to happen. I'm excited to see how that disrupts the industry, because I think that it will. But it's at the same time, it's not yet proven. And I'm looking forward to seeing it when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be curious to see too if they can, if SAP can figure out how to sort of streamline their footprint, if you will, or streamline the products, streamline the implementations of these products so that it's more relevant and lighter, for the mid-market, not so heavy, compared to like a Fortune 500 company, because they're going to need that obviously to be successful in that space. You mentioned NetSuite too, which I was actually going to bring this up too. I feel like it's kind of interesting to see NetSuite and SAP sort of converging in on the mid-market. SAP's coming downstream. NetSuite's been moving upstream ever since Oracle acquired them. I feel like they've been sort of trying to go upstream into the upper mid-market. And I'd be curious to see if SAP and NetSuite start to compete more as a result. But what are your thoughts on NetSuite sort of not abandoning their base? I mean, obviously they still have a really solid base with the smaller businesses that are just converting from, say, a QuickBooks, and this is sort of like the first ERP system. But now they're kind of going after these bigger, more complex organizations. What are your thoughts about NetSuite going upstream?
Yeah, I think they're growing more into that. One of the you asked about trends. One of the things that I think has been a bigger trend this year is that we hadn't, prior to 2023, seen Oracle Fusion and Oracle NetSuite compete on the same deals very often. Frankly, it was kind of more of a, when we talked to our connections at Oracle, they would pick one and then they would say, this is what we're going to go for, because I think they felt like maybe they were cannibalizing a little bit. I think now the tactic is different. They more often want to put both forward. So I think there's more of a trying to flood the decision-making process with an Oracle product. Maybe because of a response to this SAP platform, maybe not. But that's been a change. I think that NetSuite can really scale up. It struggles to if it's anything really super complex, but they're built on the made for NetSuite platforms that are they feel best of breed, but they are in the same code base, so you have there's an advantage in that. So I'd say that as they grow into those spaces and target them, there are spaces where NetSuite fits in that larger market. But I will say that it's still is more to their core, the small medium businesses that are going to end up in more of a NetSuite platform.
Yeah, and you use a key word there that I wanted to touch on, which is platform. I think a lot of vendors, including NetSuite, Salesforce with the Force platform, and other vendors too, are starting to get into this more of the platform mentality of, rather than just building a single app that accomplishes needs of multiple industries and functions, they're doing that, but then also building an opportunity for third parties to develop apps within that native solution, which is fascinating to see NetSuite do a lot of that too.
Well, they're trying to corner the rest of the market, right? So the conversation on best of breed and composable ERP, which is kind of the new term for best of breed, people must have gotten tired of it. Right. We'll put it in the same bucket as best practice, right? It's just kind of some people are tired of hearing it, but when you think about it that way, providers are starting to try to now that they've, I think, migrated the core of their ERP, start to build around that so that they can bring more things in-house. Epicor is doing it. They over this last year, they bought a transportation management system that they'll bring in-house, and they're bringing in a lot of acquisitions from a product perspective to integrate them with the Epicor platform. So I think that we'll see that expand, and the market will grow back towards this monolithic conversation. It's just getting there to monolithic in pieces, I guess, where you can get all of the same pieces, get all of the different pieces rather from the same provider. I think that's really where this is headed on the whole, because as the shift moves away from we got to get into the cloud, as more folks have gotten to that point, I think just about everybody has, it'll now become, how do we expand our reach within the cloud to keep more of our customers within just our platform? And that best of breed composable ERP trend is going to only really continue to grow.
Yeah. And one thing it's worth noting here that we've been talking about some of the vendors that we ranked in our top 10 ranking for 2024. Every year we put out an independent ranking of top systems in the market across industries, across functions and geographies, which is very difficult to do. It's very broad, but it can be a good starting point. And if you haven't seen that yet, I'm going to share, if it lets me, in the top left corner of the screen there, you can see there's a QR code you can scan to see our top 10 list there. And I'd love to hear, while we're talking here today, if you look at that list, kind of scan through that list and have questions about it, we'd love to take some of those questions here as we're talking here today. So I'll leave that up here for a moment to let you scan that so you can view our top 10 list. But another question that came up here, I'm going to come back to here. I just lost it. This is less of a vendor specific question and more of a general trend sort of a question. It's about the cloud, and here it is. Okay, this is from LinkedIn. I apologize. I don't see who the person is. I don't see the name on this LinkedIn account, but I do see it coming from LinkedIn. And that is, what do you think about the cloud hype? Is there real added value for customers, or is it just ERP vendors making more money on the same customer base? Stirring up the controversy. I like it.
Let's just go with a yes. I think that there are scenarios where we have seen clients that have been severely disadvantaged by the cloud platform approach, where if you don't go live on budget and on time, you're in a real tough spot because it's really, really hard to talk vendors into giving that money back. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen them do it. So we've had clients that have said, I've been trying to implement this software for 3 years, and we are still not live, and we've been paying for licenses since day one, and we'd love to get some of that money back. And vendor says, no way. Actually, you got 2 more years, so make sure you keep making those payments on time. So there is a bit of a revenue generation engine behind that's changed the dynamic of the space. Whereas in the past with the on-premise and the perpetual licensing platforms, it was much easier to say, well, we'll buy the licenses when we go live. That doesn't happen anymore. So I'd say that there is a challenge in that if you find yourself in the wrong spot. But I think that overall, the subscription base and the multi-tenant platforms that are out there from a cloud perspective are really important to the growth of businesses in today's day and age. If you want to be nimble and you want to be responsive to the market, you got to be on the internet, and there's just no other way around it. And it allows for such rapid scalability. You don't have to take new servers to the other side of the world to integrate your platforms and then have batch jobs. It's all real time, and that was a whole lot harder to do in the past, and it was really starting to feel like a cloud base anyway. Once you started doing it really well, because it's all just servers connected to the internet, which is essentially what it is. The only difference is the servers are on the vendor's server platforms and all that stuff rather than yours. So I'd say that the benefits are there, especially as it pertains to being responsive. So I would encourage the cloud platforms for sure. And at the end of the day, it also forces the conversation on customization into a place where it belongs, I think. It helps customers break habits in customization rather than reinforces them, which is the old on-premise. You write the code, you write it to say anything. Today, that's harder to do because of the multi-tenant scenarios.
Yeah, I agree. I'm here with Adam Cheatham talking about the top ERP systems for 2024. We've got a lot more to cover. Stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology-agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Get me wrong if I
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Kyler Cheatham, and I'm here with Adam Cheatham talking about the top ERP systems for 2024. We've got a lot more to dive into, so let's jump back into it. Longer term, if we fast forward, say 3 to 5 years from now, I think a lot of this becomes somewhat of a moot point. But I think right now the cloud space, the cloud ERP space, largely is largely in this transitionary stage. If you set aside, say, a NetSuite, Workday, Salesforce, those are three, big ERP enterprise tech vendors that are built in the cloud. They're built as SaaS solutions. So set those aside for a moment because this comment doesn't apply to them. But aside from NetSuite, Salesforce, Workday, you look at the rest of the market in the ERP space, most of them are migrating from their on-prem solutions, which had been around for decades with all this R&D and all this advanced functionality and stuff that was built for those core solutions. Now they're trying to rewrite all that stuff and recreate that and replicate that functionality in the cloud, which will eventually get there, but we're still kind of working through the growing pains of that transition. So to answer the question about, is this better for the vendors? I'd say in the short term and long term, it is really good for the vendors. I mean, the vendors obviously are chomping at the bit to get more cloud subscription revenue. Investors love it. It increases the multiples of their valuations and they make more money when they sell more cloud software. In the short term, it may not be as much value as it will be in, say, 3 or 5 or 7 years from now, because those solutions will mature and they'll deliver more value over time. But right now it's difficult because a lot of these vendors don't quite have the capabilities in the cloud that they used to have in on-prem. Now, having said that, there are some new capabilities they're introducing and that can only be enabled by the cloud or further enabled by the cloud, like AI and some of the analytics and things like that. Internet of Things, you think about all these things that are enabled by cloud, there is going to be more value over time. But in the short term, organizations have to be realistic that there are some bumpy growing pains in that transition.
Yeah, and I'd say that coming back to the AI conversation, you won't be able to leverage that effectively without a cloud SaaS-based platform, because when you really get into it and all that data becomes all shared, whether it's partitioned well or not, you start to gain a lot more access, right? That's really when AI gets to the point where it can not only leverage your data, but the data that's out there as well on in other systems. I think that's a really powerful thing to be able to say that predictive analytics and those types of things can not only draw in your information, but what's happening on the broader market because of the size of the platform. So there's a lot in that has a lot of value that I think is going to just continue to expand.
Right.
I do want to poke a little bit on the Workday and the Salesforce conversation, where we think of those as ERP packages. I don't like thinking of those as ERP packages, to be fair. Salesforce is a CRM, right? You can combine it with similar platforms like Financial Force, and you can pull together an ERP environment. I think that's a different thing than an ERP system.
Yeah.
Workday is also has gotten to the point where I think that they are more viable as an ERP. They started as an HCM, but they are not in anything other than professional services and more people-oriented products. They can serve as an ERP in those cases, but if you're a manufacturing company or something like that, heavy distribution, Workday is going to feel a whole lot less like an ERP system.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and it's worth noting because I tend to sort of blur the lines between ERP and non-ERP solutions, and
or on time, and
right, right, exactly. Things like starting a live podcast interview at the top of the hour versus 5 minutes after. I mean, the gray areas like that. But it is worth noting because Salesforce has that a platform, right? It's not an ERP system per se, but it does give you a platform that you could deploy technologies that give you the ERP-ish sort of experience. But it really is a platform / best of breed where you're tying together multiple applications to create the ERP functionality you're looking for, which could be a good fit, but it's not an ERP system. You're right. It's absolutely, multiple systems. And I think the vendors will probably start to continue to blur those lines a bit between ERP and best of breed and platform versus application and things of that nature. Here's another vendor specific question from Kyler on LinkedIn. Kyler points to our top 10 ERP ranking, which again, you can scan with the QR code top left side of your screen if you want to view our top 10 list and comment on it. But Kyler's comment here is Epicor is new on our top ERP systems of 2024 and in the top 5. Why the rise of this system in the last year? And what are your thoughts on Epicor, first of all? Do you think it belongs in the top 5? And we all have individual opinions, right, that may or may not align with the top 10 list exactly is how we put it out. But, we've got differing opinions, which is what makes it interesting. And you end up with sort of an average that gets you to the top 10 list, but we each have individually differing opinions. So what are your thoughts on Epicor? Does it belong in the top 5?
Yeah, and I'm pulling up the list itself so I can refer to it more directly also as we're talking here. But I would say, yes, it does belong in the top 5. I've seen Epicor do some great things, and in the areas where they have struggled in the past, they've actually fixed those things and taken that quite seriously. So one of the challenges that I had in the past, for example, was the conversation between you buy Epicor Kinetic and then you go through an implementation where you say, well, that screen's going to have to be in Classic. What did you just say to me? Because am I using 2 ERPs right now or something? And that's a challenge. That was really hard to really walk the clients through and say, look, this is coming, especially when we talk about it's on the roadmap, it doesn't exist yet. But they've plugged most, if not all, of those holes now, and they've become a more comprehensive single interface. I think that by itself is something that not a lot of providers are able to accomplish on the whole. And then I think that they are also in the way that they're growing their footprint in ERP as it pertains to pulling in more of those edge systems in the environment and making them integrated with the Kinetic platform. That's definitely belongs in the top 5. There are others in the top 5 that I may argue against, but I think Epicor does belong in there.
Yeah. I think Epicor too, one thing, if you look beyond the products that Epicor provides, I think one thing that they have going for them is just internally organizationally at Epicor, and also within their ecosystem, how they're handling both of those dimensions of ERP vendor evaluation. So when I talk about internal organization, they have a really strong leadership team. They've pulled a lot of players from the industry that have worked at other big vendors. They're now all at Epicor. So I feel like they've gotten a bit of talent at the top that they didn't have before, and they have some stability as a company. They've gone through a lot of transitions and PE handoffs and things like that, just buying and selling the company. It just sort of got gutted over time, and I think the company suffered as a result. And then also the ecosystem, they were at odds with a lot of their VARs for a long time. They didn't really have a good VAR implementation partner sort of network. And I think they're working really hard on building that back out again, which I think both of those things work, are intangibles that are worth noting when you consider what ERP vendor you want to work with.
Yep. I think it's also worth always, when you mention Epicor, you can't get away from mentioning Infor. I'd say that if you're going to talk about Oracle versus SAP, the next step down, kind of like the before the main event, is always Infor versus Epicor. I think that's really the quintessential matchup, and Epicor matches up with them quite well. I'd say that when we go through the process of evaluating them head to head, they both compete quite strongly against each other, and Infor's move towards a more appropriate branding of the cloud suite with them, M3 on the cloud suite, Sightline on the cloud suite, LN on the cloud suite, as opposed to trying to call some of it cloud suite, some of it not, has really been something that they benefited from, and Koch Industries is really their acquisition of Infor has really stabilized as well, and we're seeing that come together too. So I think those two are neck and neck on the whole. And really a good thing to watch as we really start to see the 2024 come together, is what happens for both of those.
Yeah. And just building on your comment there about Infor, this is from Venkat on LinkedIn. He says, I'm a licensed partner for Infor, and cloud proves to be a winning point for Infor implementations. Nevertheless, the startup and onboarding are pretty cringy, and any customization can be made more easy, or could be made more easy. So that's great feedback. And always, I think a lot of vendors, that same comment could be applied to a lot of software vendors, as far as the startup and onboarding needing a bit of work, and getting outside the realm of just handing off a bunch of technology to an organization and hoping that they figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious in your mind, when we talk about the big guys, the S4HANA versus the Fusion platform, what you're seeing in the marketplace as far as how those two are competing against each other. I mean, we've over the years seen some real fireworks between those two companies from somebody that's in it as a thought leader every day. How do you see that battle going down from the 2023 transitioning into 2024?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I feel like actually, in the past, SAP versus Oracle has been, that's a common evaluation we would see fairly commonly. You and I going back, 10 years. I feel like 10 years ago, you'd see a lot of SAP versus Oracle evaluations. Clients would hire us to come in and figure out which is the best. I feel like we're not seeing that as much, but what we are seeing is more of a validation of whether or not S4HANA could work for an existing SAP customer, or that Oracle Fusion could work for an existing Oracle legacy product customer. So to answer your question, I feel like S4HANA is actually doing a lot better as far as migrating their legacy customers to the cloud, although there's a huge percentage, an overwhelming majority have not yet started their migration to S4HANA. So good news, bad news, I suppose. That's good news. It's a lot of opportunity for SAP. But of that 35 or 37% of the SAP customer base that has started a transition to S4HANA, there just seems to be a lot more movement there. We don't seem to be seeing as much movement in Oracle, though. We don't see as many Oracle Fusion implementations as we do S4HANA. And I don't know why that is. It could be just, a sample bias with our client base. I'm not sure, but what are you seeing? I mean, you're actually closer to the projects than I am as far as, you manage directors.
I think that a lot more of our engagements with SAP and Oracle on the HANA and the Fusion platforms has been more oriented towards failures, to be fair and honest. SAP implementations are really, really hard, and we usually get brought into them because something is hard and kind of carrying across the finish line. I'd say that I've seen more regularly the Fusion projects become abandonment projects more than the SAPs, where SAP's functionality that doesn't quite fit still can cross that last mile, where I've seen a whole lot more where the Fusion platform doesn't fit, it's not going too soon. And that's I think the bigger worry for me on the Oracle side is that there's not a light at the end of the tunnel, where with the SAP platform, they've had a whole lot more time to really get good at it. Because they've had about the same amount of time, but they've spent more time getting good at it, maybe is a better way of putting it. So we see more S4HANA on that than the Fusion. But I'd say I would expect the Fusion to start coming up a bit more, because it is something that they've got a platform that they've done a great job of building. It's just needs more building, right? So
yeah. I'm here with Adam Cheatham talking about the top ERP systems for 2024. We've got a lot more to cover. Stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Kyler Cheatham, and I'm here with Adam Cheatham talking about the top ERP systems for 2024. We've got a lot more to dive into, so let's jump back into it. Yeah, you can bring up a couple of really good points there that I hadn't thought of. One is that, that the troubled S4HANA implementations, we're getting hired by a lot of them to help fix the problems they're having. And so
Yeah.
you look at that and say, well, is that a good sign for SAP that, a lot of their customers are hiring us to come fix them? I don't know, or I don't think so. I don't think that's a good sign. But what you bring up a good point that S/4HANA does have gaps. I mean, there's some deficiencies there that I know the SAP community hates when I say this, but I'll say it anyway. There are gaps in S/4HANA. There's things they can't do, especially when you get to some of that edge functionality around demand forecasting or PLM or whatever the case may be. You just have these gaps of things that ECC and R3 could have done really well and seamlessly. Now S/4HANA doesn't do it quite as well because they just haven't matured enough. Oracle Fusion, on the other hand, Oracle Fusion, I feel like has been around. I mean, Fusion was developed. I mean, it was like 12 or 15 years ago. It was a long time ago they started working on Fusion. So long ago that it became kind of a joke. Like, are they ever going to finish Fusion? And now it's almost like the joke. Maybe Oracle's the one laughing now because of Fusion is further along in some ways than S/4HANA, and maybe that's why we're not seeing as many Oracle implementations because there are not as many troubled implementations. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear from the audience what your hypothesis would be on why we might see more S/4HANA implementations versus Oracle.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I do expect that to develop quite a bit more over the next few years, especially as when we get closer to that SAP deadline. People are going to start freaking out a little bit more. I actually talked to a guy in Brazil recently that was talking about changing to SAP, and I want to make that 2025 deadline. And I asked him, "Have you started yet?" He said, "No." It's like, you might think about that because 18 months is aggressive for an S/4HANA platform implementation, and if you miss. And it's a big miss, then you got probably another 18 on top of that. And now all of a sudden we're 3 years in and you missed that deadline. So it's definitely hard. I would say that the biggest advantage I see on SAP's side is that we see more organizations that we're an SAP shop. SAP comes with a culture, and that is our culture. And so we are going SAP the whole way because of this. On the flip side, that the Oracle, I think that they do have a whole lot more of the depth where they've got it. So the Oracle side of it is, I would say, easier to implement. But easier is a relative term. Keep in mind.
Yes, you didn't say easy; you said easier.
Yes, comparatively, right? So I think that there's an advantage in that. So we'll see how that plays out over the next year. I think it's really going to start getting to the point where larger organizations are thinking more cloud-based, and we'll see a bit more of that, which I think is actually worth bringing up our number one here, Microsoft Dynamics Finance and Operations, because I'd say that they will continue to really occupy a really great space, because not only can they compete with the SAP's, the S/4HANA, and the Oracle Fusion platforms, but they can also compete better down market. And so if you're not $500 million or larger, you don't belong in Fusion or HANA. You just don't. It's too expensive and too hard to do. And if you do bomb it, you've got fewer resources to recover.
Yeah.
But Dynamics, we've seen scale way down. And then I think Microsoft's bigger challenge is there is a gap, a big gap between Business Central and Dynamics. And I'm curious on your side, as we talk about Microsoft, do you see them closing that gap, or do you see them continuing to take pretty significant different strategies in their market approach for those two?
That's a great question. I don't know how they close the gap, because F&O, or the finance and operations version of Dynamics 365, is so robust. It's built for a lot of different industries and functions, and they've even got, we were talking about platforms earlier. They've got somewhat of a platform strategy where third-party partners can take the core F&O D365 product and tailor it for a certain industry or a certain function. Like, for example, there's Tyler Technologies has taken Dynamics 365 and tailored it for, or they've taken Microsoft Dynamics. I don't know if it's D365 or not, so take this with a grain of salt. I may have my details slightly wrong, but in general, Tyler Technologies has taken Microsoft products and applied it to government. And I can give you a million other examples of third parties that have done that. So on one hand, they've built this very robust tool, this partner ecosystem that can tailor the F&O product for all these different industries. But to your point, if you're too big for Business Central, and Business Central is Microsoft's answer to NetSuite, really. I mean, it's meant to be kind of a smaller ERP system. There is a big jump going from BC to D365 F&O, and there is a gap there. If you're sort of in the lower mid market, it could be tricky because, and I don't know how they fill it, to be honest.
Maybe they don't.
Maybe that's okay.
We'll see. I think that they did a better job of the lower market in the past with AX, but I think that they did a poorer job with the larger market in AX. Those platforms. So we'll have to see where that goes. But I do really like the Microsoft platforms. I do like that they are number one from an F&O perspective. I think that the Business Central side of it is something that is challenging in that we see a lot of folks try to implement that themselves and without a system integrator, which it can be done, but you still have to have a PMO. And that's really the big piece of it. And this applies to all ERP implementations, right? You don't want your system integrator or your vendor to be your PMO. You want to have a separate one. And when you don't hire a system integrator and you try to do it yourself and you don't have one, it's hard to see that you need one. So if you need help with that, I can certainly give me a holler, because we do a lot of it. Yeah, that's a big part of what we do is software evaluations and just objectively and independently trying to figure out what the best answer is for clients. Here's a question that I have to ask because I know it's going to be a trigger for you. So it's going to be an awesome question here. It's from no one other than Kyler. Yes, yep, exactly. On LinkedIn. What about the movement to low-code, no-code solutions and the popularity of open source systems like Odoo? And I know you have some strong opinions about open source and Odoo. What are your thoughts on that movement in the ERP space? I don't believe the business belongs in the code. Excuse me. So that's a personal thing, and I work really hard as an independent and agnostic advisor to make sure that doesn't influence our recommendations, because we do recommend Odoo every now and again, just as often as anybody else. And I think that it does provide the teams that have, excuse me, the maturity of their IT office a great opportunity. It feels like a smaller software package for smaller companies, so I would be aware of that. Somebody came to me recently though with a really interesting conversation, which was Odoo is a core base for a composable ERP approach. What if we get our manufacturing from someone else? Sorry, I got like a frog in my throat or something, and I'm out of coffee, so I will bear with it. But as a composable ERP approach, so we could run our finances with Odoo, but manufacturing out of something else. That was a really interesting idea for me, because they're literally talking about buying two different ERPs, but one for back of the house ops and one for shop floor ops. And I think that's a great idea. It's of course not that I know of tried and tested by any means, but it's an interesting thought process that really might expand the footprint of Odoo into a lot of hearts and minds, and that it gives an opportunity where a company can control their own integrated environment from an interoperability platform. That's an interesting take on that for me. Yeah, absolutely. And comment from LinkedIn. Kyler on LinkedIn says he's so triggered that he lost his voice, and that appears to be I'm speechless at the predictability that question was going to come up. You knew I was going to ask you about Odoo, and I yeah. So just to give you a little background sneak peek into how the sausage is made, I always, whenever I have a guest on the show, including even Adam, who's been on here a million times, he knows me really well, I still send the questions in advance and say, these are the things I'm going to want to ask you. I intentionally did not put Odoo on there because I knew I was going to ask, it was going to be like a sneak attack, and I was just going to pop it on you and see how you responded. And there we go. I didn't have to do it. By the way, but Kyler did my dirty work for me, though. I do. There is one that we didn't touch on our list, which I think is important to touch on. Is IFS. They are an incredibly complex platform, and I think they're actually, in my opinion, underrated on this list. that they're really, really a very good platform, and they handle complexity very, very well. If you're talking about SAP S/4HANA and you want to kick the tires on a possible competitor, think about IFS. We have seen them really do well against SAP, especially in complex manufacturing environments. So I think that's a good thing to think about. And really, if you're thinking in those in heavily complex manufacturing, SAP, IFS, and Infor LN, we really see those three go head to head fairly regularly from that perspective. So you can't ignore them there. And then smaller businesses that have a breadth of complexity as well do really well with IFS too. They scale quite nicely.
Yeah.
So they are complex, regardless of the size of your business. They're going to be complex to implement, but they do provide really, really strong functionality for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, that's interesting. So actually, I know a lot of people in the audience have already scanned the QR code top left side of your screen. You can see the top 10 ranking for 2024 by scanning that code. But what else? So you talked about IFS you think is understated in our top 10 list. Clearly, you think Odoo should be number one on our list, right?
Well, of course,
that what you're-
because the list is in order. So I think that they in opposite order. So number one, of course, I would put Odoo in that first spot right there.
Right.
I'm just teasing.
What other changes would you make though? Like, what other things jump out at you? Like, if this is just the Adam Cheatham top 10 list, what would you change?
Yeah.
Like, what are the things that jump out at you?
I think honestly, I think NetSuite's underrated on this list. I think they belong in the top 5. And I think Fusion it does not. To be fair, NetSuite is. I think that they, with SAP coming into the market, they're facing increased competition, which makes them feel like they're not as strong. But they're a top competitor, and they've got a target on their backs, which makes it hard to see that they deserve it. They've earned that target on their backs, in my opinion. That's how I think about it. So I'd say that they're underrated, and IFS is underrated. I really like the IFS platform, and that when you get it right, their implementation teams are very good, and that's really a key to the piece of the puzzle. You don't have to just select the right software; you have to implement it well. So I think that those two are underrated. I don't like Workday in the top 5 because I don't think it's a comprehensive ERP. You won't use it to run a shop floor. And for me, I'd maybe take a more traditional definition of ERP for sure. And then as we're coming here, honorable mentions in the small, medium business space, I'd love to toss in the Rise and the Grow platforms as an honorable mention. They're saying the right things. You can't put them on a top 10 list because we haven't seen them execute it. They've really only been in existence in this calendar year. I think that those are some key components that would be in there. I like where we've got Dynamics. I like Infor and Epicor in the top 5. So I think that those are the things that stand out the most to me. And I would say that I do like Odoo as a step above the Force platform, because the Force platform, it doesn't feel as integrated to me as it ought to. So it's that there's just not as much of a breadth of functionality. Again, the shop floor, right? And from a traditional ERP perspective, is anybody using the Force platform to run the shop floor? I haven't heard of it. I've heard them try to use Rootstock.
I was just going to say,
with mixed results. So
yeah, very interesting. Those are great additions. I'd be curious to hear from the audience too, what you would change or add to the mix here in the top 10 list as you see it. And again, you can scan that QR code top left side of your screen if you want to see the top 10 list. So I guess just to kind of close it all out and sort of wrap up the conversation, Adam, what are some of you think about software vendors to watch in 2024? What are those? Are there certain ones that are up and coming, or big guys that are going to make a move that you think are going to make more of a footprint? What are your thoughts?
I would say that I think that Infor is going to continue to make a move in the space in 2024. I think that's undeniable. They're really starting to settle into a really a position of strength. I would see. I wouldn't be surprised by a drop in popularity on the Dynamics platform, similar to what we saw with NetSuite this last year, because that's certainly something that I would if I were a betting man, I would say that Dynamics drops out of the top 5 just by sheer will of the folks that try to implement it and getting tired of it. Same with NetSuite, right? And now it'll have a target. I think that you'll continue to see SAP be a struggle for some, and I think that you'll see Fusion get better and compete more head to head. I think we'll see more of that. So that's what I think we see more of. The SAP platform for Rise and Grow, I think, is something to watch. I would normally hesitate to say new ERP systems aren't going to make a difference after a year in, but you can build a client base really fast when you're implementing software between 4 and 13 weeks. So really the idea there is building a critical mass from a client base perspective is what I think we'll see that happen quickly with those 2 platforms. So those are my thoughts. I'm curious for you, what type of trends are you seeing? Less as it pertains to the top 10 and more as it pertains to the collective investments that they'll make into growing into different spaces. Are there industry trends that you're seeing that will become bigger over the next couple of years, whether it's interoperability or AI or something like that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that interoperability thing is worth noting. And actually, Kyler had a question on that too on LinkedIn. She said, what about interoperability solutions like Snowflake and Palantir technologies? I think we'll probably see more and more of that too. We talked about the platform movement. We've talked about the low code movement. Obviously, we've talked about AI. Another one is interoperability. And I think the reason for that is because, so many organizations are so far behind in their technical debt that, a lot of these companies are still going from old mainframes. They're still trying to figure out how to get off an old AS400 or iSeries mainframe-based systems. It's not a lot, it's not a majority of the market, but there's a lot of them out there, more than you might think, that are still we're talking about cloud over here and AI and all this stuff. They're still stuck on a green screen mainframe system. So you got all these companies that aren't going to make that shift overnight. They're not going to, overnight jump from mainframe or really old on-prem system to cloud AI-driven solution. That's a huge jump for most organizations. So I think the interoperability movement gives you sort of an interim solution, a way to leverage the technology you have, get more value out of it, get a single source of truth, get better analytics, and get some benefit and more value while you start to transition more of those back office systems to the cloud. So I think that interoperability movement will continue to pick up steam, and that's why Snowflake and Palantir have continued to thrive. I also think there's something going on in the market right now, sort of late in the year, and I don't know if it'll continue into 2024 because I'm not an economist, but there seems to be something with larger enterprises where they seem to be a little bit more cautious right now than they were 6, 9, 12 months ago. I feel like ever since COVID, it's just been go, invest in a bunch of new technologies because we have to. We're outdated. The work from home thing put a lot of pressure on our systems. We've got to do these digital transformations. But lately, in the last 3 or 6 months, it feels like companies are sort of backing up a little bit, catching their breath and saying, wait, hold on, let's be a little bit more selective about how we invest in technology. And I don't know if that's the economy getting weak. I don't know if that's change fatigue. Organizations are just tired of going through all these changes. I don't know. But I think that all those trends point to interoperability potentially being, stronger in 2024.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Great conversation and awesome engagement and questions and interaction from the audience too. So thank you to everyone who had all the great questions, and apologies to those that we didn't get to all your questions. So apologies for that, but it'll give us some good content and material to dive into in future episodes of this podcast as well. So fear not, your great comments and thoughts will not go to waste here. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll unpack and debrief on some of the discussion we just had. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. We'll be right back.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
I'm gonna leave it all out there and I'm gonna leave it all out there.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Kyler Cheatham, and you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So, Kyler, we just had Adam on the show to talk about top ERP systems for 2024. We've been talking about ERP vendors a lot in this episode so far, and we're going to continue to do so in the next segment as well. But what are your comments and takeaways from that discussion with Adam?
Well, I think what always strikes me is the amount of shifting that's going on in the marketplace. Like ERP traditionally, there hasn't been a ton of changes. Of course, there's always new release and functionality and research and development dollars invested into kind of what is the new system, but not only from the technology vendor side, but also from the business side, the amount of shifting that's going into really digital strategy in general. And the more kind of purity and unique aspects of your own strategy that you need to understand in order to even start to talk to these vendors. So we kind of joke back and forth that it really does depend, but now it truly does depend. Where are you going as a business? As you always say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Those are going to be the fundamental reasons to look at these vendors, because you could have the shiniest, coolest, newest AI technology, which you should look for that in a vendor. But unless you have kind of the readiness and the business processes and the strategy in place, there's not going to be any value out of that investment. So I think that piece of it on the business side and the vendor side, the amount of changing and moving and shaking that's going on is pretty unprecedented at this time.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's anytime you have technological changes and advancements and lower barriers to entry and things of that nature, you get new competition, you get new no-name vendors that come out of nowhere and sort of make a splash in the market, and that puts pressure on the incumbents to do more and to move faster and to be more innovative and that sort of thing. So I think it's a very healthy dynamic we're seeing in the market right now for sure. I think as a buyer, it's good news because it gives you a lot of options in the marketplace. The bad news is you have a lot of options you've got to sift through now, and you've got to be objective and find the right solution or solutions for you. But that's something that third-party tech agnostic providers like Third Stage Consulting can do as an advisory firm.
Yeah, 100% on that. And activating that insurance policy and kind of navigating, like it was complicated to navigate before when you had, 5 core traditional vendors. Like you kind of knew, right, who you were going to choose from a short list. But now your short list has become a very long short list. And having someone to kind of coach you through what that looks like from a technology agnostic standpoint that's only dedicated to your business goals, I think is really critical to really understanding what that looks like. It's just like our building the house analogy of, now you can have smart homes and you need a specialist to really come in there and show you how all of those things will work together so that your home is highly functional, just as your business is highly functional as well. So understanding that. I will say that this conversation was incredibly complex to unpack, and I think that's the point, right? To showcase the need to really have that deeper level of understanding. But we have a ton of software comparison and selection content on our YouTube channel. So if you feel overwhelmed from that conversation, I feel overwhelmed, and I'm in the industry because there's so much great insight there. But going to our YouTube channel, knowing that all of that content is not in any way funded or influenced, quite on the contrary, by vendors, you have that opportunity to really see that comparison, apples to apples. So we do have a software comparison playlist as well as a lot of very independent reviews on both our Third Stage channel and Eric's channel. So if you're looking kind of the next step to that conversation to dig into a system, definitely check out those 2 resources.
Yeah, great advice. And we try to put as much of that stuff out there for the public to consume and just guide them through their evaluations. And certainly, that's meant to be a starting point. And if you need additional assistance or guidance, you can always reach out to us, and happy to, even if it's just informally, happy to brainstorm ideas with you on what's going to work best for your organization or how you might navigate your digital transformation going forward. So be sure to reach out to us. And my contact information is in the description field below if you'd ever like to reach out and discuss some of these topics in more detail. But we're going to continue down this thread, though, since we're talking about software vendors and really diving into the marketplace and trends in the market. And next, I'm excited to play this clip for the audience, which is that in-person clip that you moderated at our Digital Stratosphere conference, where you had 4 executives from 4 different software companies, and you got a chance to ask them a bunch of tech agnostic questions. There was no marketing and sales spin. They got along nice. They didn't get in any, there's no Jerry Springer moments where people were fighting or throwing chairs at one another, anything like that. So great conversation. I'm excited to play it for the audience here.
Cage fights.
Right. Although that would be kind of fun. We'll have to do that sometime, but that's not going to happen today, just to set expectations. But it is a really good discussion. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll play this clip with Kyler moderating this really good discussion with software vendors from IFS, at Epicor, Infor, and NetSuite. So be sure to stick around, and we'll play that clip. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear the things you want to feel? I'll give you anything.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Anything you ever dreamed to be complete. Yes, pieces of nothing that fall.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Kyler Cheatham, and you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. So be sure to check that out. You can see and listen to all the past episodes that you may have missed. So be sure to check it out, transformationgroundcontrol.com. So excited for our next clip here we're going to play for you. This is Kyler moderating an in-person panel discussion at our Digital Stratosphere conference, where she asks a bunch of questions about tech trends and just general evolution of the marketplace. And here we have representatives from 4 different software vendors, Infor, IFS, Epicor, and NetSuite. They'll introduce themselves here in the clip, so I won't get into who they are. We'll let them do that here in a moment. But with that, let's roll the clip here with Kyler talking to the vendor panel discussion.
So these are the experts, the executives up here. So
My name is Paul Farrell. I head up our sort of industry solutions and strategy for Oracle NetSuite. I've been in ERP for, I used to say over 25 years. Now I'm saying over 30 years. And in actual fact, it's probably getting closer to over 35 years, which is a bit depressing. But I've done everything within it, some implementing, supporting, developing, marketing, selling, etc. And I feel very comfortable with a panel up here. Before NetSuite, I was with Epicor and headed up their worldwide development. And before that, I was ran in product marketing and pre-sales and used to compete with many of the Infor products, Barn and MoveX and Lawson and Sightline and even Lilly, some of those other products, and competed a lot with IFS as well. So I feel very comfortable up here amongst friends. So I'm looking forward to any questions.
excellent. Welcome, Paul. Kerrie, we'll go to you.
Sure. Speaking of amongst friends, so I used to work at Oracle, but I lead product management at Epicor. I've been with Epicor now for 6 years, and I've been in the ERP space for about 20. And within like manufacturing and supply chain management, product lifecycle management. My team at Epicor, we are focused in on not just the ERP, but also that SaaS transformation, and now working with so many emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, business intelligence, and these kinds. And it's wonderful what I do because product management is so fun and that we get to work so closely with customers, understand what it is that they're trying to achieve in their business, and fold that back into the product. So that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. Welcome.
Hey everyone, Kevin Miller. I'm the CTO for IFS. And much like my colleagues up here, a varied background of both implementation, consulting, product management, and also pre-sales falls under the CTO role at IFS, which is a bit unique. But again, it gets us very close to the customers and the prospects around outcomes that they're trying to achieve. So very happy to be here.
Excellent. And Soma?
Yeah, I'm Soma. nobody calls me with my last name. It's a tongue twister. So I'm the president and CTO at Infor. Infor is a cloud-based software company headquartered out of New York. My claim to fame is I'm actually employee number 1 with Infor. So I wrote an ERP product, which eventually became Infor. So I've been with the company for as long as Infor existed, but in the industry for, I can't even believe it, it's just over 40 years. So I've always lived in this software world, mostly in ERP, financial, supply chain. And so under my role, I have R&D, product management, pre-sales, customer success, support, and education and enablement within the company. So happy to be here. Glad to be talking to you all.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming. We have a wealth of knowledge here, so I'm going to ask some questions to start. Definitely, I'll direct it to one of you. You can go ahead and chime in if you have more to add on, but highly recommend kind of milling over some questions that you guys have as well. So the first question I want to ask you, and I'm actually going to go to you, Kerrie, to start. We'll start in the middle. But with the rise of emerging technology solutions, we've talked a lot about Industry 4.0. We've talked a lot about smart manufacturing, AI today. What does that really look like for technologies and systems kind of in that next generation of ERP solutions?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm very excited about this topic. I do think AI is going to have an incredibly fundamental, profound change on not just us as professionals and technologists, but also just people in the world and the way we interact with each other. It's pretty remarkable. I was actually just chatting with somebody on my team who was saying that her daughter is a teenager and used ChatGPT to write a very compelling reason as to why she should go stay out late with a movie, and how could she say no to that? So it's just pretty remarkable the way to see how much this is changing and affecting all of us. I think that will absolutely bleed over into the way in which we expect to interact with technology. ERP is no different, but it will continue to change and be so seamless that we won't even really notice or realize that AI is helping to manage some of the connectivity behind the scenes, helping to serve up some of the insights that we get in the screens within our ERP or within our, any other application that we're using within our business. It will become so seamless and so easy to use, just the way in which we access information from the cloud and might not realize it.
Absolutely, and maybe to you, Soma, in the CTO role and president, when you're looking at implementing these emerging technologies, what are some main considerations that you really need to understand before undergoing an AI transformation or any sort of emerging tech in your technology stack?
Are you talking more about us as a software company or as a customer?
I would say as a software company. Let's go with that lens, if that works for you.
Yeah, definitely. That's where I live. So, when you look at ERP was basically invented to really digitize business processes in the early days, right? So, if you fast forward to 2023, really, we do not want human beings to be touching the keyboard, doing things when their real job, if I hire a nurse, the nurse's job is to really go take care of patients, not really interact with systems. So the whole idea of emerging technologies is either to completely automate so that the user can actually do their day job. If you cannot do that, give them insights so that they can do their job quicker, right? So that's how you use data to drive innovation. And three, if you have to have a user experience, have that user experience be much more productive. Like, for example, if I can order a pizza at home talking to Alexa, why can't I do that at work, right? So
I don't know. That is an age-old question.
So it's just using these emerging technologies to really make the job of a real user do their function in their persona in that company versus having to learn technology. Somebody earlier asked about, do I continue to do training, right? So I haven't downloaded an app on my phone that came with a manual. So why would I have to train myself to enter a purchase order? So that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think the emerging we are not there yet. None of us are at that spot yet. But I think with the emerging technologies, we can get there. It make it really intuitive so that the user can really enjoy doing what they do.
Absolutely. And with those user interface upgrades or that more intuitive kind of living, breathing system, Paul, I'd love to hear kind of your experience in being in the industry. What are some evolutions that you've seen in focusing on that customer-centric business strategy in maybe the last 3 to 5 years?
So I think evolution is a great term because technology is going to drive evolution. When we look at it from a distance, it sometimes seems like revolution, but it is evolution, and some things that we no longer do, we just take for granted. But I think, interestingly enough, back to the previous panel, if I look at philosophically how we look at software today, certainly within Oracle NetSuite, the philosophy is all about activation of functionality rather than implementation. So if someone knows how to enter it, knows what an invoice is and how to enter it, or someone knows how to reconcile something, or someone knows how to book time, if it requires a complex implementation to do that, then I don't believe the software has been written well enough. Now, that's not, we're always going to require implementation. And if you look at new technologies, what they've done is they've made complex things more and more simple. So what's easy to use, that barrier has risen. And again, our whole philosophy is consumption. And one of the things that the cloud, and certainly consumers dealing with the cloud, is making things consumable. The most successful products out there are products that you can pick up and use. And in enterprise technology, that has been evolving for years. I remember a few years ago, a friend of mine bought a business that had a lot of old technologies, and he sort of bought it up for maintenance. The maintenance stream was still very good. But he had to go and install NetWare, if anyone remembers NetWare. And he made a mistake, so he went to uninstall it. Couldn't do it. It took forever to do it. And we just assume that we install something that doesn't work, we can just get rid of it, and everything disappears from it. And I think that's the whole thing with enterprise software, is getting to this more consumable state that we as users who interact with technology every day, and it came up, as people said, is why can't I do that in my ERP system? And we have a real focus around that. When we look at intelligence and we look at these other technologies, it's all going to be around consumption. And I think sometimes with technologists, we sometimes make a mistake of building the most awesome dream of how technology is going to do absolutely everything for us, rather than really show these simple, small things that make a big difference in how our users are going to consume the software. And I think that's the biggest thing over the last couple of years, is this consumption of the solution being done at a far higher rate. And as I said, moving away from implementation as a focus to activation. And we'll eventually get there in 100 years, but that's definitely the focus. And it changes everything that you do, from the way you sell the product, the way that you derive services, the way that you implement it, and more importantly, coming back to something that was said earlier, the way that you constantly optimize it. How new features are consumed by the customer is vital for them to be vibrant, because a lot of the time people only want a feature when they want it, even though it might be in there 10 years and think, oh, I need this new feature, they don't realize it's there. So this continuous consumption is vital for companies to remain vibrant. And we've seen a big change in that over the last few years, very, very subtly. But when we look back at how products were in the past and how they are today, we're going to see that change, and it's going to accelerate even more over the next few years, I think.
Absolutely. Excellent answer. I love that, overall concept of activation, within the business and within the enterprise, making it more of a living, breathing thing. So it was touched on, Kevin, when in our previous panel, talking about the evolution of core ERP systems, looking at more best-of-breed solutions. How does that affect your industry? And what conversation does that look like for IFS or any other, kind of core traditional ERP vendor?
I think, and that's a great question, by the way, because I think everyone in this room is looking really for a frictionless journey to value, right? How quickly can we get there? And as software vendors, we have to realize we need to play well with others. And if we don't have the best of breed in our product, we have to make sure that we can easily connect to another best of breed product that does that. And one of the comments made earlier was around this evolution of open APIs to make that connection easier. And I think at the end of the day, we have to be prepared to support whatever a customer wants in that journey. And if we're not doing all we can to be there and to support that and to make it easy, we're going to be left behind.
Absolutely. And when you talk about best of breed solutions, we kind of look at them as kind of siloed systems. And then we talk about the concept of interoperability or kind of crossing between them. Actually, Greg Benton, I steal this from him, so I have to give him credit because he's here. You know, our chief strategy officer here at Third Stage, he talks about a best for you approach as opposed to best of breed. So when we look at things like interoperability and digital enterprise operation, and I'm kind of going to ask Soma and then I'm going to go to you, Kerrie, what does that look like for the future of systems when it comes to an interoperability strategy specifically?
I believe there are 3 ingredients that drive digital transformation, as a foundation. One is what already was mentioned as APIs. Mm-hmm. The rich library of APIs available through a single gateway allows for flexible, business transformation, right? So you're not going to have technology as a barrier to get whatever you need to do in your business. The second is access to data, right? So ERP system is one piece of the puzzle at any given organization. That's not the whole landscape. So how do you get access to data in a holistic fashion that can drive innovation, whether it's AI, ML, or RPA, any of those initiatives to drive more efficiency requires access to data. That's kind of the second ingredient. The third is obviously security, right? Can I get access to these APIs and get access to this data to drive that, whatever the initiative is, in a secure manner? So if I have those 3 ingredients, I really believe that anything you can come up with, whether it's AI, ML driven or RPA driven or Gen AI, any of those things will require those 3 ingredients to drive the transformation you need to drive.
That's a really excellent, really kind of holistic point of view. What about for Epicor, Kerrie? What does that look like for your future?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great discussion point. We like to call it being a good digital citizen, because you really need to ensure that your system is able to work well with others, So it is about having that kind of integration services that are available. But it's not only the technology layer, those open APIs, the integration platform as a service, other types of data streaming technologies. It's also about how easy is it to build those integrations. When you have the types of administrators in your business or your everyday users and they need something from another system, how do you make that possible for them? How do they know when something happens in this system, then something has to happen in that system, and then that data gets transferred back to this one? And when you unlock those kinds of easy to use experiences in building these integrations, then you really get that power of the data that's flowing among the different systems, and you can create a powerful competitive advantage for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the data flow analogy when it comes to that. So thank you for that insight.
We're here listening in on a clip of Kyler moderating a vendor panel discussion talking about trends in the marketplace. We've got a lot more to cover, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling with Kyler Cheatham. You can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation. So thank you for joining here today. So we're in the midst of a conversation here, a vendor panel discussion between Kyler and 4 different software vendors. Let's jump back into the conversation.
So I want to turn to the audience. I've asked some questions. I want to see if you have any questions for our panel before I kind of go on with talking about the evolution. So we have a live mic over here. Any questions that you'd like to pose to our panel? Yeah. Greg, right up front.
I speak loud enough, right?
Yeah, the mic helps our digital audience hear it. So that's why we're like force micing you.
Perfect.
So the guys
Perfect.
online.
First of all, thank you all for joining on the panel. I mean, this is a great opportunity to speak to each of you with your different technologies and understanding of the marketplace. But we've all been talking about time to value and the things that you all are doing in order to increase that time to value or decrease that time to value, actually. If you could answer, and this is for any of you, how you are turning on functionality that leads to that immediate time to value in terms of getting something done, changing a process, implementing new functionality that's coming with the access through the multi-tenant environment, especially. Marketplaces are becoming something that you've got available to your customers. If you could address that, and it's for any of you.
Yep,
Soma?
Great question.
I can answer. So there are multiple things that kind of fall under time to value. How do you deliver time to value? One is having lived in the ERP world 20 years ago. Everyone customized, beyond recognition from the software leaving the R&D shop. So once that happens, anything you want to do, it's counter to time to value. So how do you solve that? So having functionality that is purpose built for some industry that you're serving, that drives customizations down, that is time to value. 2, delivering capability that already multiple folks have talked about, that is interoperable, that you can live in the customer's ecosystem rather than the customer living in your ecosystem, the vendor's ecosystem. That drives time to value. 3, in a multi-tenant world, you have access to industry data across many customers. Take food and beverage or any industry you pick. You have data across many customers. So leveraging that data to drive best practices back to the customer and provide process efficiencies, like process mining is something that is emerging, right? Why can't we build that into the system if I can already see how the system is being used by customers? So these are all I don't want to exhaust because other people can answer, but those are ingredients that you can have to drive, better time to value.
Absolutely. Any additions over here?
I would say, the product's a key element for time to value and making sure you've got the functionality, the workflows, the analytics, and the other things. But our approach has been to really optimize the process right from the very selling stage, marketing and selling, all the way through the sales process, all the way through to the implementation, and then the continuous optimization of functionalities. What I mean by that is our approach in sales is leading practices by industry. So right up front, before people see the software, they go through the leading practices for their industry and their size of business, and they say, this is what the best companies in this industry do. And if there are holes in that, it's known right up front that that's the case. And then when services get involved during that sales cycle, they understand exactly how the product is being presented to the customer. They understand the holes of it. So at every stage, value is added. You're not going through the sales cycle where the customer sees X, and then there's the implementation where they plan the implementation. Then you get the software loaded and it's blank, and then the consultants who weren't part of the sales cycle, then they start implementing it. Everything adds value at each stage. So the product is key in the flexibility and the ability to handle a particular industry, but it has to be something that's weaved all through the organization. And getting back to this sort of consumption side, and you mentioned it very well, one of the things that we're doing is when customers have their KPIs and their benchmarks for their industry and their size of business, we are actually using machine learning and AI to understand how the 37,000 other customers who are on our cloud, all on the same version, same release, how they're using the software, and it's learning how those people that have improved their benchmarks or are best in class, how they're using the product. And then it takes people through, it tells people how they can utilize that feature or that function and how it fits within their business. So it needs to be something that is completely continuous throughout the organization. And that's how we're going to get from that sort of implementation to activation. It has to start from the very first way that the product's marketed, sold, the implementation planning, and then the onward optimization.
Can I add?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah,
excellent.
everybody.
All right.
Yes.
All right, so this is very important to us. So just as an example as to one of the things that Epicor has done, I think first you want to identify what is the value to you? What is the value that you need to achieve? And that would be different depending on the different types of applications perhaps you're investing in. If it's an e-commerce tool, an example would be the moment you generate some online revenue, right? You capture that online revenue. For ERP or other these kinds of data intensive applications, it would be the moment you get that insight into your business. So something very tangible that Epicor has done, we recently acquired a company called Grow Business Intelligence. It has an average time to value of 45 days, meaning you connect data, build charts, and then that first metric, your user understands how to use it. 45 days, they get insight into their business, and that's something we've just started to include within our application. With the SaaS sale. So just an example of some of the ways in which we're trying to get very fast when it comes to providing that value.
Absolutely.
And I just finish up by saying, I think in enterprise software, you've seen the advent of tools like industry accelerators now being included in the product, or business process automation tools that allow you to really configure and tailor without coding in a low-code, no-code tool that's built into the UI of the product. Rather than having to code something outside. I think IFS is a little different than my colleagues in that we're still single tenant, primarily because our customers demand it. Ideally around aerospace and defense and in some areas like that, they still want to have control over when those updates are applied and installed. But I think those three main tools that you see are what's driving a lot of that too.
Absolutely. Fantastic insight and great question. Any other questions before we move on a little bit? All right, well, let's keep moving. So when we talk about kind of the evolution, we touched a little bit on kind of the functionalities, the best of breed, how the industry's moving. I wonder what your thoughts are on those kind of movement towards the low code or no code software, and how you kind of recommend that or have that conversation with your customers in the industry. And let's start with Kevin.
Sure, yeah, and I think Soma's comment earlier is very relevant to this, because if I look back even 3 years ago, certain things were customizations, and that would version lock you, and it would go through a whole series of having to recode that and uplift it, and that's a nightmare, quite frankly. So now with these configuration tools, these low code, no code, I can develop not only user-defined fields, but entire screens, new logic, tie that into the business process automation tool, and that goes right along for the ride with any updates that are installed to the product. So I think it's crucial. I think all of us have that ability today, and most leaders do, because you don't want to get stuck in that customization.
Absolutely.
Trench.
And there's a balance, right, between customization and a totally open source system. So what are some considerations or even risks, Soma, when you're looking at like a full open source or a low code on no code on your front lines that you really need to understand and manage too? We talked a little bit about training, but what does that look like as far as strategic process?
Yeah, one of the things I agree with this comment that you want to have the ability for customers to modify to the extent that is their secret sauce in terms of their business differentiation that drives value for the customer. So you need the ability for the customer to do that, but you want to be able to do that in a governed way, right? Like so, if it is not in a multi-tenant system, there is no such thing called customization, right? It has to live in an upgradable, upgrade-friendly way, right? So it has to be done in an extensibility fashion. And when you do that, if you go build, 1,000 extensions to the core product that was delivered in the cloud, then again, you have kind of defeated the purpose of having a solution that is standard, easy to move, easy to continue to consume. To Paul's point, new innovations that come along. If you're not able to consume, you've kind of lost the value of being in a multi-tenant environment. So while low-code, no-code, and I believe we can talk about it too, I do believe that Gen AI is going to change the low-code, no-code in a much more easier way to accomplish what you need to accomplish. But all of that need to be done with governance, both from the vendor side to make sure it is secure and it's going to be upgrade friendly and high performant, and from the customer side.
Exactly. And that takes me to my next question. Paul, I kind of want to expand on something that you said when it came to understanding where the processes kind of marry with the system. So we have a lot of people in this room and just our overall network community that are either considering selecting a new software or just evaluating kind of what is their current state and what does that look like. What would your advice be to them that they can do internally before they consider a new system and build out those requirements?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I just want to address something from the previous round of questions. One of the things that I will say where we are in the technology sphere today, we're in a situation where best practice is lagging behind technology. And I think you mentioned about these certified industries where every single change has to be certified and you can't upgrade. I mean, that's best practice, and it's there to make sure that, a plane doesn't drop out the sky, et cetera, because of the ERP system's incorrect. But that is lagging behind what technology enables. And that's why so many industries have been disrupted and large companies have been disrupted by small, because they're working towards best practice, but technology is vastly outstripping what best practice supports, which is going to be interesting. And also that comes down to the customization as well. I would say, again, if you can't do massive customization and then you're version locked in doing it, that's a whole design issue with the way that the platform's created. And so again, all of these things are being improved, but again, the best practice, don't customize anything because it's going to make it easier to upgrade, again, is a laggard idea based on where technology was 10 years ago. So that's a real issue that's out there. As far as what people should think about, we're in such a changing world today in what a company needs to use in order to stay vibrant and to compete. That it is an ERP decision is very difficult because you're going to have this for the next 10 years, hopefully for the entire span of the company. And the reason people swap them out is because they've stopped being fit for purpose, or they can't handle new business models or the way that we're doing business. And I think this is key when you're looking at a new solution and how you need to think about things. And I just look at manufacturing. If you look at manufacturers from 10 years ago, you make a product, you generally go through a distribution channel who add more value and then sell it to the consumer. We've seen recently with new technologies, manufacturers opening channels directly to the consumer, still going through a distribution channel as well, which puts more pressure on them. And we've also seen many manufacturers realize that their skill isn't in manufacturing. It's in marketing and design and all these other things, and they start to outsource it. So if you buy a system that does best-in-class manufacturing, it's all about manufacturing execution or lean processes on the shop floor, and then that starts to outsource, you could be left with a solution that's not going to keep up. So I think it's vital these days to look at the marketplace, see where things are going, and making sure that you're going to have a solution that's going to be able to evolve based on the way that you sell and the way that you interact. And just one final example on that, you think of most companies are trying to drive recurring revenue models because they get higher valuations and it's easier to predict future revenue. Now, moving from a transactional model to a recurring revenue model, there's all sorts of financial implications on rev rec and how you bill and all these other things. And again, if you're not thinking about how the business and how your industry is going to evolve, you might end up spending a huge amount of money buying a solution that actually holds you back and doesn't give you that flexibility if you're just looking for it on what it's going to do for you in the very short term.
That's excellent. Definitely a lot of advice in there. I always call it with Eric, that's a watch back. So rewind that and watch it back a few times because there's a bunch of nuggets in there.
We're here listening in on a clip of Kyler moderating a vendor panel discussion talking about trends in the marketplace. We've got a lot more to cover, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say to me. I've been waiting for so long to hear.
Hi, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm your host here on Transformation Ground Control. And if you haven't already, I want to invite you to buy my new book. It's called The Final Countdown, Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. It's my first book. I'm very proud of it. I love this book, and it was my attempt to create a summary and a playbook for what it takes to be successful in defining a digital strategy and a roadmap for your organization. So there's a lot of things we can cover. When we talk about digital transformation, we talk about a lot of stuff on this show, but I wanted to condense it into a readable, sort of a sequential format that made it easy to help define a digital strategy for project teams that is unique to your organization, unique to your goals and objectives. So really hope you'll read it. I hope you enjoy it. Again, it's called The Final Countdown. You can read that book by scanning the QR code right here in front of you, or you can go to thefinalcountdown.com. Again, it's been an Amazon bestseller since it came out, so I encourage you to check it out, and love to hear your views and your comments on it too. So The Final Countdown, my new book, you can go to thefinalcountdown.com or scan the QR code in front of you. Hope you enjoy, and we'll see you soon. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling with Kyler Cheatham. You can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation. So thank you for joining here today. So we're in the midst of a conversation here, a vendor panel discussion between Kyler and 4 different software vendors. Let's jump back into the conversation.
But Kerrie, I'm curious, when it comes to kind of even migrating from an on-prem solution to a cloud-based solution is still something that's very real for a lot of businesses. Even though the cloud has been around for a while, it takes a while to not only secure capital for that investment, but ensure your organization is ready. What are some considerations that you would give to businesses that are looking at their legacy on-prem model and being like, we got to move, but we're not quite sure how?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I know that this is absolutely a discussion that continues to happen. I think these were great comments made because one of the things that's important to really consider is, of course, your business, the industry that you're in, the compliance regulations that you have to comply with, and that could potentially dictate not just moving to cloud, but what type of cloud, right? Because there are so many options out there in the industry, and I definitely encourage you to do that research, right? Because you have the single tenant, you have the dedicated tenant, which is like dedicated databases, but still some shared architecture. You have the multi-tenant, which is really, truly the shared architecture. But then you have the different types of data centers where it would be hosted, right? So if you are a highly regulated type of organization within aerospace and defense, you would likely need the special U.S. government regulated type of ITAR or CMMC type of data centers. And they're all different types, and then they would have different types of configurations that are possible. So it's very important that you think through the compliance regulations in your business, the outcomes that you expect, and the types of functionality that you need for your organization, and then work with the vendors that provide that type of support for your business. And then there are so many other types of, moving from on-prem to cloud to really keep in mind as well. Certainly security, the benefits of having multiple layers of data protection in the cloud, multi-factor authentication, of course, but then things like just separating it from where email servers, right, are so susceptible to phishing attacks and where the majority of cyber criminals can infiltrate an organization. So having multiple layers, disaster recovery, backups, and a vendor that really understands and provides and is open to you about the types of controls that are in place, all very important considerations when moving to cloud.
Absolutely. Great answer. Another watch back. We should all just watch this back multiple times. But kind of moving from, obviously all of you are system technical executives, but when it comes to the culture of the organization, or really the people side, we talked about technology, we talked about process. Let's talk a little bit about people. And Kevin, I'll start with you. How important are cultural strategies such as organizational change or ensuring that really matches the system? What's kind of that balance look like?
Yeah, I think that's extremely important, because not just from a technology fit, but also from a cultural fit. What kind of institutional knowledge does that vendor provide? What type of experience do they have in your industry? What type of customer references do they have in that industry? Do they have folks with high turnover that might not have that institutional knowledge that follows that level of experience all the way through the organization? So I know, much like these vendors, I'm sure you can do visits or to customer experience centers if you want to go see technology examples in the vendors' offices and see what that culture looks like in terms of support that's provided. Also, partner networks, right? A lot of opinions exist today around, do I go partner, do I go direct? And that's why you folks are here to help guide that solution, because it is a culture and a people fit beyond anything. And that's really the same as it always has been for 40 years, right? It's people by people at the end of the day. And do you have the trust in that team to deliver the outcomes that you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. And even going further from just like the core team network, which again is so important to have that balance and so many different voices. Soma, how do you ensure that your culture as an enterprise, how do you coach your customers to be ready for a digital transformation?
Yeah, I mean, as Kevin touched, I mean, change management, working with the customer. I mean, in an earlier conversation, I think Eric or somebody said, setting the goal up front. What are you trying to accomplish by this, change? Just going from on-premise to cloud or switching out one solution to another, it's not really fun exercise, right? Like what is it that you're trying to accomplish in terms of business outcomes? And then work your way back from there to accomplish that business outcome. What kind of tools and processes you need to get there? And do you know your 5-year long-term plan and what your business is going to look like? Does the system that you're looking at have the flexibility to live with you and allow you to grow? I mean, it's a complex topic. So working through that to make sure that you have alignment on the tools, alignment on your strategy, alignment on the culture of the vendor organization and the customer, right? So any of these cloud systems that you go to, I think Paul said it, you're going to live with that relationship for 10 years or more. So you need to have that alignment. And is this vendor going to be close to your organization to help you stand side by side, to help you grow as you grow? Like it has to be mutual benefit, right? Otherwise, this doesn't work.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that overall partnership, and what does partnership mean? What does that word mean? We kind of deconstruct that relationship to secure that alignment. And Paul, you had talked about kind of the optimization. And I'm wondering, when we go through, say we selected the software, we went through implementation, we kind of managed the people through that, we went live, had a party, and then all of a sudden we have to optimize. And we didn't quite think through kind of the people side of things like user adoption, training. What would you say to customers that are kind of lacking on the optimization side? What are some strategies that they can implement to ensure that they're getting the most return on their investment for technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think optimization is our entire process. We call this Suite Success is what we do, and it's about building and selling and everything. But one of the big pillars is optimization, and a vital part of that is just how people are going to further consume the software, and that is in the DNA of our company. We've been at this at our 25th year and always been a cloud company, and every single one of our 37,000 customers on exactly the same release, service pack, and patch of the software. And virtually all of them customize and personalize the software in some way that they want. And the way that we keep them on that is we allow them to continually optimize. So that customer that bought 25 years ago is getting the same return on investment that today that they got back then. So the money they spent then, they were on the latest version of the product. But there's so many companies out there that it's only a tiny portion of people that get in the latest version of the product. All these other people are paying money, but they're not getting a return on investment. So that is just philosophically through our organization. So within that is this whole thing about you always thinking about how you're going to take on new capability and how you're going to roll that out more to the customer. And it's all about success, and it's all about concentrating on value. I love to hear people talking about value. I'm sort of old lean guy, and I love the Toyota production system and the way that they focused on value. And it's as relevant today as it was back then, but it's all about how you're going to continually take account of new things that come out there. Now, for years, I'd say 30 years, I've worked in ERP and dealing with customers, always on the vendor side. And it's amazing, almost every customer event I go to where people say, we want this in the product, I would say 95% of the things people request are in the product. Because because they went live, implemented it, and didn't think about that. Didn't go and look at the release notes. And anyone out there, incidentally, if anyone can work out a way that we can get people to read release notes and read what's coming in the product in a most effective way, tell me, because they've tried absolutely everything. And because the thing is, people only want something new when they want something new. And it's only at that time it becomes important. So we put a lot of time and effort so that people can discover what's needed. And as I said, when someone's in the application and they're doing something, I'll give you a small example. When someone is going and running a query and it takes more than 30 seconds, we'll tell them, you know something? This would be instantaneous if you move this query to the BI system. So why don't you move that to the BI system where it's cached and it does all the clever things so it's instantaneous. And it's things like that, and again, using intelligence to help people optimize and consume more of the product. And more importantly, and I'm sorry, I'm whispering on here.
Oh, no.
More importantly, again, getting to that consumer side, the way that you make that effective is you let the person know who uses the product every day, uses that particular area, know that this new feature comes through. Because a lot of the time, the new features, the release notes, it's the admin people or it's the IT people that read it, and they'll decide whether it's important or not for the end user. So again, in this next generation of technology, it's how the technology lets the AR clerk or the planner or the warehouse manager know that this new features, and this is the way it's going to improve what you're doing now. And that's where I think a lot of the newer technology coming through is going to help substantially this continuous optimization.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
So I couldn't agree more with what Paul said. So this is a huge challenge in a cloud environment. We at Infor, we keep adding new features every 6 months. Actually, initially we were adding every month, which was too hard for customers to keep up with. So every 6 months we basically open up, here are new features. But still, customers and the users, you got to be targeting the end user. Like the ERP of the last era was much more geared towards power users. There's a few people, they spend all day learning about the ERP, and it worked quite okay because they understand what they need to do. But now you're targeting the real end user. Then they need to be enabled, and they need to be able to turn on features that they're not even aware of. So how do you get that to awareness to the user? That drives a lot more adoption. And adoption is the name of the game in cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, adoption is the name of the game in life, right? Like, so that absolutely is true. So
we're here listening in on a clip of Kyler moderating a vendor panel discussion talking about trends in the marketplace. We've got a lot more to cover, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear the things you want to feel? I'll give you anything.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology independent and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling with Kyler Cheatham. You can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation. So thank you for joining here today. So we're in the midst of a conversation here, a vendor panel discussion between Kyler and 4 different software vendors. Let's jump back into the conversation.
So Kerrie, you kind of touched on what, Paul and Soma are talking about when I asked you the question about AI. Like there may be tools that makes this more efficient in kind of either communicating or pushing these upgrades or showcasing that awareness. How can the business be a good partner to you guys and making sure that they, cultivate a mindset of awareness around those new functionalities so they're not making those calls, hey, can you do this or can I do this? And making sure and empowering them to actually source that information themselves.
Yeah, that's a great question. Something that I've seen work really well is you should go to your vendors and ask them to meet with you on a regular basis to talk with your leaders about what's new in the business. And this should be included. This shouldn't be like a special fee. This should be kind of like a health check. We call them value exchange workshops. It's a great opportunity to kind of go back, double check, what were those original business outcomes? Did we achieve that time to value that we expected? And then you can kind of have a discussion around what needs to change. Why haven't you achieved whatever it is that you need to achieve? And again, that's a great opportunity to come together on a regular basis to have those kinds of discussions with the business.
Absolutely. And, to learn more, what is opportunities or to actually activate on that partnership. I have a challenge. Please be my partner and help me solve it. And that, I think that's really the most beautiful evolution that we've seen when it comes to kind of vendor-customer relations. So I'm asking all the questions as I typically do. So what questions do you guys have in the last couple minutes here that we can ask this amazing panel? It's such an amazing opportunity to have them in the room. So I want to make sure that we're addressing and answering any questions that you have. We got a mic coming over.
There seems to be something of a consensus from different presentations today that any implementation time frame shorter than 12 months is not at all realistic. Any thoughts from any of you about ways that implementation time frames could be shortened?
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I feel as though I'm in the last panel now, and I just have to say the opposite.
Good for you.
I think our philosophy in growing our business is, we call it land and expand. And that is to implement the most impactful value as quickly as possible. I mean, one of the things that ERP has suffered from for many years is selling future value. Buy all of this stuff, go and implement it for 2 years, and you get all of this value. And then people get tired or whatever else. Our whole philosophy is getting people live in under 100 days. And that is our average. That is not a made-up stat, that is average. But it might be financials plus, getting that first pillar done and implemented. Now, with a lot of companies, that might not be their goal. They might want something else. But it's about getting that value straight away. So you're spending less up front. You're immediately seeing the value. And no one has any issue paying for value. We all do. What we have an issue is paying for the promise of value and never getting that. So I fundamentally disagree that it's under 12 months. Now, I'm looking at it through a software vendor's lens, okay? So what I mean by that is I'm thinking about by the time you sign the contract to when you're going live. And an implementation starts before that in planning and selecting the right vendors and building that knowledge. So I know that it's not accurate. So that's what I'm talking about. So I think that there's this focus on value, everyone's seeing the value, and everyone then gets bought in, and they're excited about implementing the next stage rather than the opposite, which has happened historically with ERP, where people get fatigued. We're not doing phase 2 for the next 3 years because we're done, because we've spent that long. So that, and we have been myopically focused on that for about the last 7 to 10 years. And we're always looking at ways of improving that. Technology's helping, philosophy's helping, process is helping doing that. But I fundamentally disagree that anything less than 12 months is
I would agree with your comment. And we, on an average, if anything goes over a year, that's way too long in the cloud world, right? You have to be able to define, you cannot go live with everything, to Paul's point, but you define what is of most value that has the least risk, and then prioritize that first. And you should be able to do that. The vendor and the customer should be able to work together to stage that implementation in such a way that you start to realize value in a much shorter time frame than 12 months or more. And we see the same thing. I mean, we haven't done quite 100-day implementations a lot, but 9 months or less, I've seen a lot of those implementations where people start to see value in the cloud.
Yeah, it can be a phased approach. I love that discussion earlier with Agile versus Waterfall, but it can be phased. I think that's what we're talking about, where it's like focus in on that value. Maybe it's not the full ERP portfolio. Maybe it's a portion of it. Just like I mentioned, that business intelligence tool, that's a quick add-on. You have other things in your business you can connect, bring in data. There are these kinds of applications across our portfolios, right, where you could focus in first, get moving fast, and then you have that quick win and your team is excited.
That's a great point. Having that overall, psychological approach, industrial psychology layered into it too. So you're able to have, that kind of win. Kevin, you got to go.
Yeah, we call those little wins, right?
Yeah.
And I would just take advantage of your advisors, your consultants around industry best practices or all that prep work that can happen before a project begins. Because as the previous panel noted, that work either has to happen before go live or it happens after go live. And it's much better to do it before go live, or else you have real risk to the business that you're trying to clean things up or all of a sudden address things that are real risk items that could be detrimental to the business. So take advantage of those. They're good consulting practices will help you, align that much more quickly.
Yeah, we call that actually our phase 0 checklist. So before we even go have a vendor conversation, Greg and team will actually take our clients through a phase 0 checklist. Because implementation, again, deconstructing that, when is it activation? When is it optimization? That's what we look for. And shameless plug, you can download that for free on our website. So just so you know, it is available. So we have time for one more question. Oh, wow, okay.
Given the rise of unified namespace, do any of you have on your product roadmaps MQTT connectivity, pub-sub type of a model, moving data back and forth from the ERP to the unified namespace?
So I'll just make a comment. I'll start. IFS's managed cloud is based on Azure. I'm going to Microsoft in a couple of weeks for a bit of a retreat related to what was discussed earlier. So I can't speak to it now, but I would suspect that there's a strong movement towards that space with what's being released early next year by Microsoft.
Breadcrumbs, we call that. Great question. We had a few more in the back here, so I'm a sucker for the audience. So you guys know we'll do a few more, and then our panel does have to get to their travel plans.
So this is not basically a question. It's more of a, so how can you basically generalize that 12 months time frame, because we have wide variety of industries with different maturity levels and everything. Because my experience says that for in one of the implementation we were given 12 months, but the first 6 months went to data collection itself because the data wasn't even there, right? So there must be some checklist as you indicated. Because we need to have some datum level and then commit on the timelines. If the datum level is not known, for example, the data is by far the biggest challenge we face, right? If the quality data is not, fixing later, it never happened. It never ever happened. We signed off, we go live happened, but when we went after a year, the data quality was the same as we left. So how do you basically align yourself to these kind of timelines and all these kinds of demanding situations?
So I think that's a very valid question, and it's how long is a piece of string for some things, because people are in different segments. But as I said, I give my answer a software vendor's lens, which is when the deal is signed to when it gets implemented. And that's what we do every day. So we're used to working out how we can get the product and value implemented as quickly as possible. Well, many people will be doing it once every 10 years or once every 5 years. But again, the work that's done up front to select the right solutions, the right vendor that's going to drive the value that your company wants is vitally important for the back end side of it to work well. But there are definitely, NetSuite has implementations that have taken 18 months. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It does happen. I'm saying on average, it's under 100 days, and our philosophy is about doing that. And we do it all the time, so we're used to it. So we can add a lot of value there. But again, in this, as part of the conference here, it's all about selection and managing that process. That being done professionally and being done well, and really thinking about the changes and how it's going to roll out in the phases, helps that process to take place efficiently as well. So you're right. It's not an absolute fact that it's going to be under 100 days, but that is what the aim of it is. And again, the people up here, we do this all the time, and we work with all sorts of companies to do it. So we know that the pitfalls and other things, and can aid that process and make sure we're adding value each of that stage, so you're going to be able to meet your objectives.
All right, great stuff. Thank you, Kyler. Thank you to our guests from the various vendors that were just on that discussion. Appreciate having you here today. And we've got a lot more to unpack from that conversation. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more on Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 147. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Kyler Cheatham. And Kyler, we just had this great vendor panel discussion that we played, the clip we played for the audience here that you moderated with the vendor panelists. What were some of your thoughts from that discussion?
I mean, well, what an honor, first of all, to even have that amount of experience in the room, but be able to have that conversation and just to kind of set the stage for these events. Sometimes it can be kind of awkward to have vendors in the room because we do have speakers, a lot of times that are saying things about vendor biases. And that's the point, right? We want to give them the opportunity to react to that or to have, a say in that conversation. And the reason that level of executives came to the event was because they see the value in having a transparent conversation. And you'll see that in some of our audience questions that they asked as well. So it was an incredible opportunity to ask directly, what should be my implementation timeline? What should I be asking in those questions about new trends or research and development? What does my vendor relationship look like? All of those are very critical questions, and you kind of heard from the top down of where they're going as actual entities and systems and leadership alignment. So I think it was an amazing opportunity to really ask that. And I want to give our audience here an opportunity to ask questions as well. So if you do put your questions in the comments that you have for those specific stakeholders, I will tag them and their support team on here so that you're able to get those questions answered as well. And we're continued to have that diverse and transparent dialogue. But what an amazing opportunity to hear from them about kind of the future of their systems and really the customer centric, I think, approaches really got me, Eric. And I know that's, an approach you preach and Third Stage is really built upon as a founding core principle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's, we try to strike that balance between being completely tech agnostic and not having vendor influence. We certainly are not affiliated financially or any other way with software vendors, but also, reaching out and trying to understand the vendors too. You have to do both. You have to be unaffiliated, but obviously we have to play nice with software vendors. And that's why it's great to see this panel discussion and see what great job you did facilitating that session or moderating the session. And, just hearing these different opinions that are coming from some of the thought leaders in the space too. So it was really interesting.
100%, and highly recommends that you follow who we've tagged in the description here and their teams to kind of stay up to date on that thought leadership. And of course, if you have questions about specific systems, you can either ask them here or on our YouTube channel as well. We have reviews of all of the systems in multiple formats that we featured there as well. On that panel. So thank you, Eric, for all, the great content, inviting them. You're really the reason that they showed up, right? Was because of your connection with them. And thank you to the vendors for all of the transparent conversation. If you want more, have questions, definitely leave those comments here and we'll collect them and connect you with the right people.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, look forward to doing more of those discussions too, and involving a ever increasingly diverse group of people in those discussions too. So that'll be great. And thank you for moderating that. And thank you to all the guests we had on the show here today. Really appreciate their involvement. And thank you most of all to the audience for the great, not only the support of this podcast, but also asking great questions and having good engagement here. One thing you could do to help us is to share this podcast with others in your network and in your community. So we'd love to get the word out to more people. So appreciate anything you can do to help spread the word. So thank you for being here today. Love this episode. Love being with you guys, and hope you have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.
Tom.